So guys, what if neglected Naruto, son of Lord Phenex and Serafall, is slave in high school movie? The underworld is a lot like the human world in many ways, but there are subtle differences that easily distinguish the two. The Y are both roughly the same size, but the underworld has a much larger landmass due to there not being any oceans. Instead of a blue sky with a day and night cycle, the sky in the underworld is purple and void of a sun or a moon. Devils, being creatures driven by desire, tend to live more extravagantly than humans. Instead of simple houses and apartments, most devil families live in large mansions or castles. One such devil family lives in a large stone brick castle near one of the underworld's largest cities, Lilith. This castle belongs to one of the most powerful families among the 72 pillars. The pillars consist of the most politically recognized or powerful families in the underworld. Some of the pillars are renowned to be more powerful than the others. One of these well-known clans is the Gremory family. The House of Gremory is well known throughout the underworld as one of the strongest pillars in devil society. The devils of this family are famous because of their superior magic talent and huge magical reserves. The newest addition to the house is also becoming known for more than just his magical talent and reserves though. When Venelana Bael married into the House of Gremory, the next child born to the house also received the Bael family's signature power, the power of destruction, which is a type of demonic energy that grants the user explosive attack power that can annihilate anything in its path. When Lord Gremory and Vanelana had their first child, he was gifted with the power of both clans, resulting in a child with extreme potential. That being the case, it was clear to all of those within Devil Society that the House of Gremory is well deserving of their position in society. Anyway, back to their castle. Currently sitting on one of the balconies connected to the prestigious castle were three young teenagers. The first of the group was none other than the Gremory's famous son, the Gremory Prince, said to have the potential to become one of the most powerful devils that the underworld will ever know. The 16-year-old devil is wearing a plain white shirt with red trimming on the sleeves. He is wearing simple black jeans and shoes, but the most prominent part of his appearance is his hair. His hair is another trait that he inherited from his genetics, the famous crimson-red hair of the Gremory house. His hair is medium length and rather messy. His name is Serafall Gremory, and he is currently leaning against the edge of the balcony, looking at his best friend with worry in his eyes. The second member of the group on the balcony is sitting on a chair and looking in the same direction as Serafall, with just as much worry in her eyes, if not more. The girl has long black hair tied into twin tails that reach down to her shoulders. She is wearing a simple pink and blue top with white sleeves and blue jeans. Although she looks slightly younger than her two friends, she is also 16 years old. This girl's name is Serafall Citri. The Citri clan is another one of the highest-ranking families among the 72 pillars. The House of Citri is recognized for their advanced knowledge in healing magic, and they also specialize in water-based magic. Serafall is just as famous amongst Devil Society as Serafall due to her ice-based magic. Unlike the rest of the family who specializes in water-based magic, Serafall is known for her talent with ice. She is also considered to be one of the most powerful young devils with potential for great things. Serafall is currently sitting on a balcony at Gremory Cast with her two best friends. Just like Serafall, she has her vision focused on the third member of the group. Her eyes display so much sadness and concern for her best friend and crush, although she hasn't admitted the crush part to anyone. Finally, the third member of the young group. Just like them, he is also 16 years old and from one of the most prominent devil families in the underworld. The third teenager has short spiky blonde hair and azure blue eyes. He is wearing a plain orange t-shirt and black jeans. He also has a black choker around his neck with the kanji for Gaijin or outsider on it. His name is Naruto Uzumaki Phenex. Unlike Serafall and Serafall, Naruto isn't a pure-blood devil. His father is Lord Phenex, the head of the Phenex clan, but his mother was Kushina Uzumaki, a human woman that he met during his travels to the human world. When he met Kushina, they fell in love at first sight. He wanted to bring her back with him to the underworld, but knew that already having a wife and son would make this impossible. Instead, he decided to keep the nature of their relationship secret from his family, although he thought it was true love. After merely a year, he got bored of the human woman, but not before she gave birth to his second son. Kushina Uzumaki died giving birth to Naruto, with her dying wish be that his father takes care of him. Because of this, Naruto was taken by his father back to the underworld to grow up as part of the Phenex clan. When Lord Phenex returned to the underworld with a newborn son, his wife was livid. She had no idea about his relationship with Kushina and was furious when she found out that he brought the child back with him. She knew that they couldn't just abandon the baby, so she grudgingly agreed to letting the baby join their family. Although he is considered to be part of the Phenex clan, he was forced to take the name Uzumaki Phenex. This served as a way for Naruto to remember his place. Being the bastard-born son of the Phenex clan, he grew up despised by most of his so-called family. Lady Phenex even went so far as to use magic to force him to wear the choker with the outsider kanji around his neck at all times. Being born half human and half devil means that Naruto is nowhere near as powerful as his two friends. He still retains the traits of the Phoenix clan, but to a much lower extent. Because of this, he is nowhere near as well known or as popular as his two friends. Naruto is currently leaning against the rail of the balcony a few meters away from the other two, and looking up at the empty purple sky. While his friends' faces show worry, sadness and concern, Naruto's face is void of any emotion. Naru-chan, what happened? Serafall asked her friend hesitantly. I was born, he answered instantly with no emotion in his voice. What does that even mean? She asked him, standing up and moving to his side, putting her hand over his. For as long as I can remember I've been told that I was a mistake, he told her with some anger creeping into his voice. This damn thing is proof of that. He growled, pulling on the choker around his neck. Maybe it would have just been better if I was never born. Slap. Naruto turned to look at Serafall, not even bothering to acknowledge the stinging feeling in his cheek. He could see tears welling up in the sides of her eyes and a furious expression take over her face. Don't you dare say that, she yelled at him. It's true, though, he started with a cynical tone before. Slap. Now that both of his cheeks are stinging from the powerful slaps that Serafall sent his way, he sighed and turned away from her, looking back up at the empty sky. What happened, Naruto-kun? Serafall spoke up, trying to save his best friend from Serafall's rage. I know life isn't exactly pleasant for you sometimes, but you've never said anything like this before. Naruto hesitated, considering how to respond. Just another wonderful birthday, I suppose, Naruto muttered. Today is your birthday. Serafall asked, dumbfounded. You've never told us when your birthday is, no matter how many times we asked you. I never really saw the point. Everyone in my family pretends that my birthday doesn't exist, so why should I bother celebrating it? He asked her rhetorically. Serafall sighed sadly. This is the worst that she's ever seen Naruto. He's had a few rough patches over the years, but today was different. He sounded so sick of everything. He sounded as though he's given up. Something must have happened, something bad. I've never seen you so dejected before, Naruto-kun, Serafall stated with concern evident in his voice. Serafall and Serafall both turned to their blonde friend, waiting for him to answer. There was a few minutes of quiet before Naruto broke the silence. Every year on my birthday, Lady Phenex gives all of the maids the day off and takes Ruval out for the entire day, leaving me at home alone with a Tucson. He started to explain, his voice barely above a whisper. Usually he just locks himself in the study and pretends that I don't exist. Serafall and Serafall listened patiently, waiting for him to get through whatever it is that was clearly affecting him so much. This afternoon, though, he came out of his study. I was in my room. When I heard him calling out to me, I was hesitant at first, but he kept on calling to me, so I finally went to see what he wanted. When I found him, I could smell the alcohol coming off of him. Naruto paused for a moment, clenching his fist before continuing. When I found him, he started screaming at me. He told me that I am a disgrace to his family. He told me that I never should have been born. He told me that he wished I died along with my mother when I was born. When he finished, Serafall gasped in shock at what he was telling them. Naruto has never told them about his mother. Apart from the fact that she was human, she had no idea that his mother died during childbirth. Serafall's eyes narrowed in fury when he heard this and his fists clenched angrily. That's not all, Naruto said to get their attention again. Finally he turned to face his two friends. They could see the anguish in his eyes and were slightly confused when he started to take his shirt off. When he finished pulling it over his head, he looked up at them to see their reactions. He noticed Serafall almost break the handrail that he was now gripping tightly, as a red aura slowly started to surround his body. Serafall, on the other hand, looked mortified, and tears actually started to flow down her cheeks. They were both frozen in shock, completely speechless. After a few moments, the black-haired girl regained a little bit of composure and stepped closer to Naruto. She raised her hat to his chest and softly traced a circle around his heart. Naru-chan, let me bring you to my family. They can fix this, she pleaded. On the left side of Naruto's chest, over the spot where his heart is a fresh burn mark. It was roughly the size of a fist and there was a slight scorch mark around the edges. Directly over his heart was raw, burnt skin that was already beginning to scar. No, he replied instantly, stepping away from her. A Tucson did this to me and I will never forgive him. I want the scar to remain so that I never forget what he did to me. But both his friend tried to protest but were interrupted by him raising his hand to stop them. I will never forget how I got this scar, or who gave it to me, and when I come back I will make him pay for everything that he has ever done and said to me, Naruto told his friends with venom in his voice. Both Serafall and Searzex stepped back in shock at the words. Even though Naruto has always had a rough life, he has never let it get to him like this. He has always just played it off like it was no big deal and tried to stay positive. This Naruto was completely different though. Standing in front of them was a Naruto so full of hatred and resentment. What do you mean, when you come back? Serafall asks, her voice flooded with concern. I am leaving the underworld. I don't know where it'll go, but I am leaving, he told them blatantly, which made them widen their eyes. I need to get away from this life. I need to live without being despised and looked down upon. I will never be able to do that in the underworld, so I am leaving, tonight. And no. Why you can't leave? Serafall shouted with even more tears streaming down her cheeks. Naruto-kun, you should come and live here with me. You're a brother to me in every way except blood, and I am sure that my parents would happily adopt you, Searzex pleaded. Naruto looked to his two best and only friends and frowned solemnly. I am sorry. This is something that I have to do. The anger in his voice was gone now and it was replaced with pain and anguish. I won't let you go. Serafall cried, wrapping her arms around him. Please don't leave Naruto, she begged, nuzzling her face into his neck. He could feel the wetness from her tears on his neck while she hugged him tightly. He hated the fact that she was crying because of him, but this wasn't something he could back down from. He tenderly wrapped his arms around her and squeezed gently for a few minutes. Sarah-chan, he whispered, pulling her away so that he could look at her. Please don't be sad. I am not sad, so there is no reason for you to be. But I don't want you to leave, she sniffed. I have to though. This is something that I need to do, he told her softly, but I promise you that I will come back one day. She silently looked into his eyes for a few moments, trying to find any hint of deception, but she couldn't. She knew that he was telling her the truth, and she knew that he believed that this was something that he had to do. I will hold you to that promise, she warned him, trying to sound as threatening as possible. He chuckled softly and offered her a warm smile. Serafall blushed slightly at him giving her such a genuine smile and couldn't help but smile back. Naruto's smiles were infectious. She stood up on her toes so that she could equal him in height and placed a soft kiss on his cheek. If Naruto wasn't so good at hiding his emotions after all these years, he probably would have blushed right back at her. The feeling of her soft lips pressing against his still stinging cheek felt amazing. When she leant away from him her cheeks were even redder, but the smile was still evident on her face. Serafall stepped back so that Searzex could say his goodbye. Are you sure that you want to stay here with me, Naruto-kun? Searzex tried one last time. You know that you're welcome here. I am pretty sure that my parents like you more than me anyway, he finished with a humorous laugh. I appreciate the offer, but as I said, this is something that I need to do. I think that getting away for a while will give me a chance to figure out who I am as a person, Naruto replied genuinely. Searzex simply nodded in acceptance. There wasn't much else he could do. He didn't want his best friend, his brother, to leave, but it would be for his own benefit. He couldn't help but agree that getting away for a while would be good for Naruto. Searzex hid his sadness well, but he hid his anger even better. Right now he was furious. It was a struggle to keep his aura under control, let alone keep the smile on his face. How could the Phenex family get away with treating one of their own members like this? They were one of the top families among the 72 pillars and were respected by the entirety of Devil Society. He was distracted from his thought when he felt Naruto pull him into a hug, filing away his anger for a later time. He returned the embrace. Stay safe, Naruto-kun. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to contact me, he finished as they pulled away from each other. Until next time, Aniki, Naruto said with a smile to Searzex. Searzex couldn't help but smile at the term of endearment and with a nod of his head he leant back against the edge of the balcony. Naruto turned back to Serafall to say his final farewell, but before he could open his mouth she jumped at him again, wrapping her arms around his neck and nuzzling her face against his chest. He still hasn't put his shirt back on, by the way. I will miss you so much, Naru-chan, she whispered. I will miss you too, Sarah-chan, he told her tenderly, hugging her tightly against his chest. After several minutes and multiple pleas for him to change his mind, Serafall finally let go of the blonde devil and stepped back to lean against the balcony next to Searzex. Well, I suppose this is goodbye for now, Naruto said with a smile, but felt a bit sad to be leaving his two best friends behind. Be safe. You better come back, Searzex and Serafall told him in that order. Naruto offered his friends one last genuine smile before turning away from them. He focused his energy and after a few seconds a large magic circle appeared on the ground beneath him. He didn't turn back to face his friends a final time because he knew that if he did he wouldn't be able to leave. With a deep breath he closed his eyes. The circle slowly rose around his body. When it was above his head, it closed inwards and disappeared. With that, Naruto was gone to say that a lot had happened in the underworld since the departure of Naruto Uzumaki Phoenix would be an understatement, not that he knew about any of it until it was already finished. The Great War between the three factions, devils, angels and fallen angels, started and finished before Naruto even knew there was conflict. The deaths of the four great Satan have left the underworld in a frantic power grab. The descendants of the original four tried to rally support to continue on with their ancestors' legacy. Their plans, however, were opposed by a new group of devils that rose during the end of the Great War, the Anti-Satan faction. The Anti-Satan faction was against the idea of a continuing war because they felt that it would endanger the survival of devils as a species. The tension between the two ideologies quickly overflowed into a civil war between the original Satan descendants and the Anti-Satan faction. The war-crazed descendants were eventually defeated and forced to retreat into hiding in the deepest depths of the underworld. Their names became titles for the new rulers of devil kind. To replace the original four Satans, the titles of Lucifer, Leviathan, Beelzebub and Asmodeus were passed on to the strongest and most influential among the anti-Satan faction. The title of Asmodeus went to Falbium Glacia Labilas, along with being one of the most powerful devils currently in the underworld. The newly named Falbium Asmodeus was known as the greatest tactician and strategist of devil kind. He played a major role in the defeat of the old Satan faction, and was given the title of Asmodeus because of that. The title of Beelzebub was awarded to Ajuka Astaroth. Just like the other new Maus, Ajuka is known as one of the most powerful devils in the entire underworld. He is also known for his incredible knowledge and innovation and was the sole creator of the evil peace system, which is playing a major role in rebuilding the devil population. The title of Leviathan was claimed by Serafall Citri, now known as the strongest female devil in the underworld. Serafall played a key role in the victory of many battles during the Great War, and the civil war against the old Satan faction, proving time and time again that she was among the strongest devils of their era. Serafall Citri became Serafall Leviathan after the end of the Civil War. And finally there was the title of Lucifer, to be awarded to the strongest devil in the underworld. The title was awarded to none other than Sears X Gremory. The previous heir to the House of Gremory was celebrated as a hero after the end of the war, and his unparalleled power led to him becoming the strongest of the new four Maus. During this time Naruto himself was completely off the grid. Oblivious to the events of the worlds around him, for the first 300 years of his self-imposed exile, Naruto decided to completely cut himself off from the rest of the world. He dedicated all of his time to training himself and becoming stronger. He spent decades tirelessly training his body, increasing his physical durability to ridiculous levels. His strength and speed became awe-inspiring after the decades he spent dedicating himself to reach his full potential. Naruto was always told growing up that the human blood flowing through his veins was a filthy taint to his existence. He was told that being a despicable half-blood meant that he would never be anything more than a mediocre devil, with pitiful levels of power. They couldn't have been any further from the truth. Naruto soon learned that his blood status, being half-devil and half-human, was not the curse that he had been told it was. No, it was more like a gift, with many advantages that he would be sure to take advantage of in the future. At first, he just used his blood status as motivation to grow stronger and prove those who were against him wrong. He pushed himself to reach his full potential, and when he reached it, he kept on pushing. He later learned that because he was half-human, had the ability to mask his power and magical signature. By focusing on the human blood running through his veins, he could make it appear that he was an average human, with no recognizable power, which would come in handy a lot in the future. That was just the tip of the iceberg. Towards the end of his 300-year bootcamp, he discovered another advantage to being half-human, one that would give him an edge over those claiming to be pure-blood elitists. He was looking forward to testing his new ability out one day, but he wanted to save it for the right occasion. After such a long time away from the underworld, Naruto felt guilty about leaving his friends and not making any contact with them. He knew that Serafall and Searsex would be worried about him, and he knew that they would probably kill him when he returned, but he still wasn't ready yet. He even missed his older half-brother, Lord Phenex. Out of everyone in the Phoenix clan, Lord was the only person who treated Naruto like family. When Lord and Lady Phenex were around, they tended to keep Lord away from Naruto, but when it was just the two of them, they got along rather well. He hated the fact that he abandoned his best friends shortly before multiple wars broke out, and he hated the fact that he wasn't there to stand by their sides, but in saying that, he knew that he would have been nothing but a burden to them. When he was younger, he was so convinced that he would never become a being of significant power. With the thought being drilled into his mind every day, it was hard for him to believe that he could have been any help to his friend in battle. Now was a different story though. After escaping the constant ridicule and discrimination from his family, Naruto had no doubts that he would be a valuable comrade to anyone that he considered an ally. 3 centuries of tirelessly pushing his body to and beyond its limit rewarded Naruto with more than just a strong body that looked like it was chiseled from solid stone by the best artists in the world. His speed increased to seemingly impossible levels. He spent decades training with extremely heavy weights attached to his body. When he first took them off, he couldn't even control himself. He took the weights off, planning to go for a morning run to test his new speed. He stopped 3 seconds later and turned around to find that he had dashed 100 miles, leaving a long deep dent in the ground from the pressure of his impossibly fast movement. Deciding that it was too risky for him to have so much speed, he reattached the weights to his body and even increased them to slow his body down. The weights did more than just increase his speed though. Adding weight to his limbs meant that he had to use more effort to simply move his muscles, along with the endless physical exercise. This led to him gaining terrifying strength. With a single punch, Naruto accidentally destroyed an entire mountain, leaving nothing but a crater in its place. Now would probably be a good time to mention that Naruto was living in his very own dimension. For the first 100 years of his self-imposed exile, he traveled between the least inhabited areas of the human world, to both avoid causing unnecessary destruction and to avoid anyone who might be searching from finding him. He eventually got tired of moving from place to place, so he spent the next few decades dedicating all of his time to learning and improving his magic. The result was simply described by one word: terrifying. How someone with little to no knowledge when it comes to magic managed to become so adept from teaching himself was a seemingly impossible concept, but Naruto prided himself in making the impossible come true. That being said, he eventually found a way to create his own personal dimension. This gave him a comfortable place to live, without having to move around so much, but more importantly it gave him somewhere he could really let loose with his training, without worrying about any consequences. The final thing Naruto was proud of after the first 300 years of his absence from the underworld was his appearance. He wasn't vain or anything like that, but he could now proudly admit that he was no longer the little boy that left the underworld. Now he took the appearance of a strong and handsome young man. He stood at a proud 6 feet tall and didn't have an ounce of fat on him. His body was rippling with compact muscles built for speed, maneuverability and pure strength. His skin was no longer the milky white color that it had been. Now it was more of a tan color after spending so much time training under the sun. His bright blonde hair was now a bit darker as well. His slightly darker golden blonde hair was a bit longer than it had been, but it was still as spiky as ever, and he now had jaw-length bangs framing either side of his face. Overall, Naruto Uzumaki Phenex had turned into an extremely handsome young man. It is currently midday in Naruto's own personal dimension and he is drying himself after getting out of the shower. He spent most of the morning training and would have probably just continued for the entire day, but there was something important that he needed to do. After returning to his room, Naruto started getting dressed. He pulled a plain white t-shirt over his head and slipped himself into a pair of black jeans. He put on a simple pair of white sneakers and then finished drying his hair. He didn't have to give any attention to his hair once it was dry because it just naturally went back to his signature style and stayed there. He turned to the mirror to inspect his appearance and reached for a round object sitting on the desk. Picking it up and turning it around, revealed it to be a black choker with the kanji for outsider on it. Naruto's face adopted hate-filled glare before it was replaced with an amused expression. He simply chuckled to himself before dropping the choker that haunted his childhood on the desk and turned around. He took a deep breath and just from the expression on his face, it was obvious that he was both nervous and excited for the day to come. It's been over 300 years since I left that cursed place. I won't be staying for long, but I just hope I don't run into anyone who recognizes me. With that thought, he summoned a magic circle beneath his feet, and disappeared. When Naruto opened his eyes he couldn't help but smile to himself. If he wasn't sure that he had just teleported to the underworld, he could have easily assumed that he was in a human scientific research lab. He was now in a large room with multiple desks with complicated-looking machines on them. What caught his attention, however, was the lone person in the room. A man was standing by a desk fiddling with an intricate-looking machine. From where he was, Naruto could only tell that the man had slicked back dull green hair and was wearing a white lab coat. It's unwise to teleport into the presence of a Mao unannounced and uninvited, don't you think? He said in a calm tone, not even bothering to turn around. He could feel that there was no ill intent coming from the intruder, so he found no need to stop what he was doing. I apologize, Ajuka Beelzebub-sama. I mean no ill will towards you. I just don't want to be seen by anyone today, so I thought it best to teleport directly to you, Naruto answered in a polite and respectful voice. This was Naruto's first time meeting Ajuka. He heard a lot about him when he was younger though. Sirzex told him about his friendship and rivalry with the green-haired devil, and from everything that had heard about the Mao, he was a good and kind person. What can I help you with? The green-haired Mao asked with a little interest, still fiddling with the machine in front of him. I am here to inquire about your evil peace system. Firstly, though I think that it would be impolite if I was to not introduce myself. Naruto paused, waiting for the Mao to turn around from what he was doing. When he did, he bowed respectfully and continued, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki." Ajuka thought about the name. For some reason it sounded familiar to him. When he remembered where he knew that name from, his eyes widened and his jaw dropped slightly. "You're Naruto Uzumaki Phenex?" he asked, not even bothering to mask his shock. The cheerful look on Naruto's face vanished instantly and was replaced by an emotionless expression. Even though his face was void of any emotion, Ajuka thought he saw a brief flicker of hatred in the blonde's eyes. "I do not go by that name anymore," Naruto replied immediately in a calm voice. Ajuka was a bit confused by his answer but put the thought to the back of his mind. All that he knew about Naruto was that he is the second son of the Phenex family who vanished from the underworld on his 16th birthday. He knew that Lord and Serafall were close with Naruto, but they never told him the reasons behind the blonde's disappearance. "So what can I do for you, Uzumaki-san?" Ajuka asked in a careful tone, not wanting to offend Naruto. "I am hoping to acquire a set of evil pieces so that I can begin building my peerage," Naruto answered without hesitation. Ajuka had to admire the conviction in Naruto's voice and smiled genuinely. "I have a set ready for you already, Uzumaki-san," Ajuka said as he gestured for Naruto to follow him to another room. What? Naruto asked in surprise. He wasn't expecting there to be a set already created for him. He couldn't think of any reason for there to be, especially since this was the first time that he had met the creator in person. He figured that the only way to find out was to follow the Mao and hope that his questions would be answered along the way. Naruto followed Ajuka into a new room and waited as the Mao unlocked a drawer, pulling out a small wooden box. "When I first came up with the idea for the evil peace system, I created several prototype sets. The initial prototypes were extremely powerful. There were no restrictions to the pieces, resulting in unlimited potential," Ajuka began explaining to the confused Naruto. "Obviously we decided that this was too much power to simply hand out to any high-class devil that decided they wanted a peerage, so I developed a restricted version to distribute to the public." Naruto nodded along attentively as he took in the information being told to him. "We decided that the original sets would be distributed among the 4 Maos, being the most powerful devils and the leaders on the underworld. It only made sense that the 4 of us have the strongest peerages," Ajuka continued. "Yes, that does make sense, but I don't see what that has to do with me," Naruto asks. "Well, when I first invented the system, I created 5 unique prototypes. However, there are only 4 Maos." Naruto's eyes widened at what Ajuka was implying. "When Lord and Serafall asked me what I was going to do with the 5th set, I told them that I was most likely going to study it and then destroy it. It would be too great a risk to let such powerful artifacts fall into the hands of just anyone." Naruto just nodded his hand in agreement. "But, when I told them about my plans, they requested that I save the set for a certain someone, that certain someone being you, Uzumaki-san," Ajuka finished with a grin. Naruto just stared at him dumbly, blinking several times in shock, making Ajuka chuckle to himself. "Why, you do realize that even though I am technically a high-class devil, I am also half-human, and now you're offering me a set of evil pieces that have the potential to create a peerage on par with that of a Mao," Naruto stated in disbelief. "You say that like it's a bad thing, Uzumaki-san. In my opinion, being half-human in your case is nothing but a blessing," Ajuka said with a knowing smile. Naruto froze again with trying to hide the shocked look on his face. "How do you know about that?" he managed to stutter out, still recovering from his shock. "I didn't become the Beelzebub Mao because of my good looks," he joked with a humorous laugh. "I may not know you personally, but the recommendation from Lord and Serafall was good enough for me, and now that I've met you in person, I do not regret my decision at all." "Thank you, Beelzebub-sama." Naruto bowed respectfully and then took the small box that was handed to him. Ajuka simply nodded and sat down while Naruto opened the box to examine his pieces. When Naruto opened the box, he looked down at the pieces that he would now use to build his peerage. The first piece that caught his attention was the basic white king-shaped chess piece. He reached into the box and pulled it out so that he could look at it more closely. Upon touching the piece, it started to glow and changed from a plain white color to a swirl of orange and black. When the color change was complete, it flew out of his hand and straight into his chest. Naruto flinched at the action, expecting it to hurt. Instead, he was surprised when the piece simply disappeared into his chest. Ajuka watched with an interested grin as Naruto was surrounded by a powerful orange and black aura. He was surprised when he felt that the aura surrounding Naruto was radiating power that was almost on par with his own. Whoa. This feels amazing. Naruto exclaimed as the power was radiating from his body. After a minute, the power dissipated and left Naruto inspecting the rest of his evil pieces. He gasped slightly when he noticed that all of the pieces were now also the same orange and black color that his king piece changed to. Another thing that had him confused was the fact that some of the pieces now looked different, instead of normal chess pieces that looked slightly deformed. How intriguing. Ajuka smiled as he got up to join Naruto in inspecting his evil pieces. What happened to them, Beelzebub-sama? They were all white before I absorbed the king piece, but now they're this color and some of them look different. Naruto acts in confusion, gesturing towards the pieces. Please just call me Ajuka, Uzumaki-san, he said with a smile. When Naruto nodded in acceptance, he continued, when you absorbed your king piece, the set was bound to you. That's why the pieces have changed. When a set of evil pieces are bound to their king, they can change, he explained cryptically. What do you mean, change? Naruto asked with interest. Well, I will be the first to admit that there are still a lot of things that I don't know about the evil piece system. Despite being its creator, however, I have witnessed something similar to this before, 4 times in fact, he stated while Naruto's eyes widened in realization. The original prototypes have the ability to change when they are bound to a king. It happened with all of the Maos. When I absorbed my king piece, my set turned green and several of the pieces became mutation pieces. Mutation pieces? Naruto asked curiously, examining his set. Yes, that's right, mutation pieces. The piece that you have that look different to normal chess pieces are what we call mutation pieces. They are very special pieces and are extremely rare among the restricted sets that most high-class devils receive, Ajuka explained. What's so special about them? Naruto asked with interest. Well, the cost of reincarnating someone into your peerage is dependent on the power of the person being reincarnated. And the power of the king, sometimes it could take multiple of the same piece to be enough to bring someone into your peerage. With a mutation piece, however, you can bypass this restriction and reincarnate them with just one mutation piece. He told Naruto before elaborating further. Those reincarnated with mutation pieces are usually extremely powerful. However, beings reincarnated with mutation pieces from an original prototype evil piece set are on a whole new level. The amount of raw power they gain is incredible. Add the trait bonuses on top of that and you can pretty much turn a human child into a high-class devil with one mutation piece. Wow, was all Naruto could manage. He was completely amazed by the possibilities that were now open to him. With his evil pieces, he could surely create an extremely powerful peerage. He looked down from Ajuka to his pieces and took a tally of what he had. 8 normal pawns, 2 normal rooks, 2 mutation knights, 1 normal bishop, 1 mutation bishop, and last but not least, 1 mutation queen. What are the trait bonuses that you mentioned? Naruto asks, looking back up at Ajuka. A good question, Uzumaki-san. Rooks are worth 5 pawns. Someone reincarnated with a rook gains superhuman strength. The bishop piece is worth 3 pawns and grants enhanced magical abilities. A knight piece is also worth 3 pawns and gives a devil incredible speed. The queen piece is worth 9 pawns. Someone reincarnated as a queen gains the characteristic of a rook. Knight and a bishop, making them the most powerful, apart from the king. Ajuka explained while Naruto listened attentively. Last but not least, the pawn. As you can probably guess, the pawn piece is used to compare the value of all the other pieces. Being reincarnated as a pawn doesn't give superhuman strength or speed, and it doesn't increase the devil's magical capacity either. But, the pawn piece gives a unique ability called promote. Promote? Naruto questioned. If certain conditions are met, then a pawn can use the promote ability to gain the abilities of any of the other pieces besides the king. The physical strength and endurance of the pawn will affect how long they can maintain themselves while in the promoted state, Ajuka explained. There are 2 conditions required to be met for this to happen. The pawn must have permission to promote from their king, and they must also promote from within enemy territory, just like in chess. That is amazing. Naruto exclaimed excitedly, leaving a wide grin on Ajuka's face. You have created a truly impressive system, Ajuka-san. I am glad that you approve, Uzumaki-san, Ajuka said with a chuckle. Now that I am finished explaining everything to you, do you mind if I ask a question? Not at all, Naruto answered politely. What do you plan to do with your peerage? Ajuka asked curiously. Naruto took a moment to think over his answer before his lips turned up into a smile. I don't want my peerage to be my servants. I want them to be my friends and eventually my family. I will treat them as my equals and give them as much respect as they give me. I will not discriminate due to a person's past or race. All I care about are the qualities that I deem to be important, and when my peerage is complete, I plan on returning to the underworld and working towards my personal goals, he explained enthusiastically. A very admirable plan. Ajuka commented approvingly. I assume that because you came to me in secret that you will not be staying in the underworld for long? Your assumption is correct. I came to you because I don't want anyone to know that I was here today, Naruto answered with a slight frown as he thought about his friends and half-brother. Very well, Uzumaki-san. I will keep your secret, Ajuka said with hesitation. I just pray that Serafall never finds out that I saw you and kept it from her. Ajuka trailed off with a bit of fear evident in his voice. Huh. Naruto acts in confusion. She was devastated when you left, you know? Every year on your birthday she would buy you a present in hopes that you'd return that year. After the war though, she began cursing your name, but it's obvious that she just misses you terribly, and masks the pain by pretending to despise you, Ajuka explained. Naruto frowned at his words. He felt guilty about leaving before, now he felt 100 times worse. I had to leave. She knows the reasons why and I am sure that she understands. I just hope that when I do return she doesn't kill me, Naruto said sadly. I suppose we'll find out once you've completed your peerage, Ajuka said with a smile returning to his face. I suppose we will. Naruto agreed, returning the smile. If you have no more questions I will be off. I have no more questions, Uzumaki-san. I wish you the best of luck in building your family, and look forward to your return, Ajuka said sincerely. Thank you for everything, Ajuka-san. Naruto smiled and bowed respectfully. He then turned away from the Mao and created a magic circle. Ajuka examined the circle with interest before it disappeared. He expected to see the Phoenix clan symbol but was pleasantly surprised. What an intriguing fellow, Ajuka said to himself with a smile once Naruto was gone. 500 years after leaving the underworld, it has now been 500 years since Naruto Uzumaki Phoenix disappeared from the underworld, and 200 years since he first obtained his evil pieces. Just as he told Ajuka Beelzebub he would, he has been busy building his family. As well as doing other things. After all of this time, his task was almost complete and he was almost ready to return to the underworld. All that is left for him to do now is find 2 people worthy of his mutation night pieces. The search has been going for a while now, but his queen was confident that she had found 2 individuals who are perfect for the role. Now they just had to wait for the perfect opportunity to confront them. Naruto and the current members of his peerage were mostly living inside the dimension that Naruto created over 4 centuries ago. Said blonde-haired devil is currently sleeping in his very own king-sized bed. How ironic. Naruto was just wearing a pair of loose-fitting black track pants, showing off the toned upper half of his body. His body looked like it was chiseled from stone and his tanned skin was flawless, besides from the large scar, burn mark over his heart. Although his eyes were closed, hidden behind his eyelids, his left eye would occasionally flicker between the usual azure blue and a blood-red color. Naruto stirred slightly when the sun shining through the blinds hit his eyes. He opened them slowly and brought a hand up to rub the sleep from his eyes. He stretched his body out and yawned before looking to his side when he heard the sound of soft breathing. He couldn't help but smile when he saw who was in the bed next to him. Lying on her side with her face on the pillow next to his own was his beautiful queen. Her long bright green hair was let out and made its way down to her waist. He continued to smile while admiring the beauty of his queen. She was easily one of the most beautiful people that he had even encountered, and that was saying something. The duvet was down at their waists, revealing his queen's naked upper half. It definitely wasn't the first time that he has seen her well-endowed chest either. She has been his queen for almost 200 years after all, and she spent most nights sharing a bed with him anyway. His hand absent-mindedly reached up to trace the scar just above her left breast. The small scar was the only imperfection on her entire body. The rest comprised of perfect, milky white skin. As he traced his finger along the scar, the girl next to him stirred slightly and released a small moan before opening her eyes slowly. "Good morning," he said softly, still tracing his finger around the scar without even realizing it. "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you," he apologized with a light chuckle. "Good morning, Naru-kun," she replied happily, leaning forward to brush her lips against his softly. He didn't mind her action and was happy to return the brief show of affection. They pulled away from each other with smiles on their faces and the girl next to him yawned cutely before sitting up. "Would you like some breakfast, my queen?" he teased while getting out of the bed. "Shouldn't I be the one offering you breakfast, my king?" she replied in a mock respectful voice while watching him pull a white t-shirt over his head. "You know as well as everybody else that I see all of you as my equals, so you shouldn't have to cook me breakfast," he said with a grin. "Besides, you cooked yesterday morning." The green-haired beauty laughed softly before getting out of the bed, showing that all she had on was a pair of white panties. "It's okay. I can smell food, so the others must be up already anyway," Besides, we have business to attend to today, she said while pulling one of Naruto's shirts over her head and not bothering to cover her lower half. She walked past him with a bright smile on her face. Come on, we have an important day today. Naruto just smiled and followed her out of his room. The smile on his face was so sincere that if he saw it as a child, he wouldn't have believed that it was really him. Having a family was so nice. They soon arrived in a large room that appeared to be a connected kitchen and dining room. There was a modern-looking kitchen with a long counter separating it from a large open area. In the open area was a round table with multiple dishes of food on it. This smells amazing, guys. Naruto exclaimed happily, gaining the attention of those in the room. Good morning, Naruto-sama. A girl with long pink-purple hair called out cheerfully. Said girl was sitting in one of the chairs surrounding the table and reading a book while eating breakfast. She was wearing a pink top that left her midriff exposed and a yellow skirt, showing off her slim and well-endowed body. When she heard Naruto enter the room, her eyes shot up and a happy smile was plastered across her face. Naruto smiled warmly. How many times do I have to tell you not to address me so formally? We are equals, Ji-chan, he said in a mock pleading voice, knowing full well that she wouldn't listen to him. I am sorry, Naruto-sama, but as my king the first must address you with utmost respect, she replied happily. He just sighed but kept the smile on his face. One of these days, Ji-chan. One of these days you will just call me Naruto. Good luck with that, Naru-sama, his queen teased as she walked past him to sit down and put some food on her plate. He just stood there pouting at her, childishly making one of his bishops, the girl he called Ji-chan, giggle in amusement. Naru-kun? Why are you pouting like a child? A new voice asked before giggling. This snapped Naruto out of his childish behavior and he turned to see the last member in the room. A girl with knee-length silver hair was leaning against the counter smiling at him. Her eyes are both blood red and she is wearing a white button-up shirt and a short black skirt to show off her long legs. Good morning, Ura-chan, he teased, knowing full well that she hated the nickname. I was just pouting because Ji-chan always addresses me so formally. The beautiful girl, who looked to be around 18 years old, gave him a sweet smile after hearing him tease her. The smile was too sweet for Naruto's liking and he took a step back with fear in his eyes. You know, Naru-kun, I haven't had any breakfast yet this morning, she cooed in a sweet voice, giving him a wide smile. Naruto's fears were proven to be true and he took another step back, hitting the wall behind him. What's wrong, Naru-kun? You look awfully nervous, she asked him, maintaining the ever so sweet tone of voice. Naruto considered trying to run away, but knew that the chances of getting past the girl that took both of his rook pieces would be an impossible task in such a confined space. And nothing is wrong, he cried out childishly when the silver-haired girl stopped in front of him, making the other girls snicker in his direction. You smell amazing, Naru-kun, the girl co-ed softly before jumping on him and sinking her teeth into his neck. Kya! Naruto cried out comically, even though he was used to the feeling by now and it didn't even hurt that much. Yep, Naruto has a vampire in his peerage, and being half-human left her with an addiction to his blood and his alone. After a few moments the silver-haired beauty stepped back from Naruto with a satisfied gleam in her eyes and a slight blush on her cheeks. Thank you, Naru-kun, she said shyly and went back to leaning against the bench. Even though she does that pretty much every morning now, she still gets so embarrassed afterwards. It's so adorable, Naruto thought to himself humorously. It's okay, he said with a smile in her direction. I told you that you can suck my blood any time you want as long as you leave me with enough to function properly, he joked. The girl simply smiled and nodded to her king, with the blush still barely visible on her cheeks. Where's our cute little pawn? Naruto's queen asked him curiously. He asked me last night if he could have a few days to train on his own, Naruto answered with a soft smile. That kid won't stop until he's reached his full potential, even then he'll probably keep pushing himself, Naruto finished with admiration in his eyes. Like father like son, the green-haired queen laughed. What are you implying, my beautiful queen? Naruto asked her in a teasing tone. Simply that he takes after you in so many ways, and you are old enough to be his father, she joked. You're even older than I am, he teased back, by a lot. Naru-kun, she gasped in mock offense, it's rude to joke about a lady's age. The others in the room just laughed along with the banter between their king and queen. After a while things calmed down and Naruto had some breakfast. When he was about to get up and take his dishes to the kitchen, he was interrupted by his bishop. Naruto-sama, have you heard from my fellow bishop recently? She asked in a concerned voice. Naruto frowned at her question. His first bishop was the second member to join his peerage, after only his queen. None of the other members besides the king and queen have met Naruto's other bishop because of some complications that arose when she was reincarnated. Everyone is really excited to meet his other bishop, but even after all this time they haven't had the chance. I am sorry, Ji-chan, but she still doesn't feel ready to join us yet, he answered her sadly while she looked down from his gaze. Don't worry though, it won't be long now, I promise, he finished with enthusiasm which made her look up with a hopeful smile. I am very excited to meet her. I hope that we can get along very well, she said hopefully. I am sure that you'll be the best of friends, Ji-chan, he said with a warm smile. He couldn't help but admire her optimism. The way that she looked at everything so positively was inspiring to him. She is so much like her previous master, Naruto thought to himself with a fond smile at the memory of her. Naruto stood up from the table and took his dishes to the kitchen. After washing them he joined the others back in the dining area. His focus was on the vampire of the group now. Have you heard from your father lately? He asked her. Yes, Naru-kun. He said that it has been fixed and will be arriving soon, she said, which made Naruto smile. He also wanted to know if we are married yet, she teased. The reactions around the room were all different. The green-haired queen simply laughed at the dumbfounded look on her king's face. The pink-purple-haired bishop kept reading her book to hide the wide smile on her face. Naruto himself froze on the spot, and if he wasn't a master at masking his emotions he probably would have been blushing slightly. What? I thought he was just joking when he said that we were to be married, exclaimed the now embarrassed Naruto. Surely kicking his ass was enough for him to let you join my peerage. The silver-haired vampire saw the opportunity to tease her king even further and took it instantly. She walked over to him seductively and wrapped her arms around his neck. Am I not pretty enough to be your wife, Naru-kun? She asked in a mock-sad voice. Naruto regained his composure while looking down at the beautiful girl trying to tease him. He realized that he could turn the situation around on her and took his chance. Of course you are my beautiful vampire, he coed softly before kissing her lightly on the cheek. The girl let go of his neck and stepped back with an immense blush covering her cheeks. She began to stutter in embarrassment before being saved by her queen. Leave the poor girl alone. The green-haired queen called out with amusement in her voice. Okay then, Naruto said with a victorious smile before returning to the kitchen for a glass of juice. Upon returning once again, Naruto looked around at his fellow devils. I swear the gender balance in this peerage is against me, Naruto mumbled to himself with amusement. PFF'd. As if you don't love the attention, Naru-kun. His queen called him out instantly, resulting a small pout. You're right. I love you guys, Naruto said with a smile before dashing around the table and wrapping his arms around the pink-purple-haired bishop, Ji-chan. Why don't you ever show me affection like the others? He asked in a teasing voice. Because it would be inappropriate, Naruto-sama. She squealed and giggled at the same time while trying to wriggle free from his grip. One of these days, Ji-chan. He laughed before releasing the blushing bishop. Said blushing bishop seized her opportunity to escape and ran from the room after picking up her book. Naruto watched her run away with a smile. He really did love his new family. After 5 centuries he was happy and content. He had the family that he always wished for but never had growing up. He could have easily just lived happily with his peerage and enjoyed the peace and quiet within their secluded dimension. But that wasn't his future. Every time he looked in the mirror, he was reminded of his past by the scar burn over his heart. He vowed to himself that he would never forget and he would never forgive, so until he was satisfied that the people who had filled him with so much pain and anger had paid for their transgressions, he would never be able to live in true peace. Naruto was distracted from his thoughts when his queen spoke up. Are you okay, Naru-kun? She asked with concern at seeing the look in his eyes. Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking the past and future, he admitted quietly. The green-haired queen frowned slightly and leaned in to embrace her king, her arms wrapped around his body and her face nuzzled into his neck. Try not to think about it too much, you know that when the time comes we will all be by your side. I know, he said, hugging her back, thankful that he had her support. After a few minutes of the simple form of comfort, the two pulled away from each other. Naruto had a smile on his face and his mood had improved drastically. Are you ready to go, Naru-kun? We have 2 nights to find, his queen asked with enthusiasm. Let's go, he answered excitedly, reaching for her hand and leading her out of the room. Month has passed since Naruto obtained the final 2 members of his peerage. With the 2 new knights in his group, he has now finished using all of his evil pieces and is almost ready to make his return to the underworld. He just wanted a bit more time for the newer members of his peerage to adjust to life as a devil. As soon as he completed his peerage, he made contact with Ajuka Beelzebub. The Mao was pleasantly surprised to find Naruto appearing in his lab out of seemingly nowhere. It was a similar experience to the one that took place 200 years ago when Naruto first returned to the underworld to obtain his evil pieces. Ajuka was happy to find out that Naruto was doing well for himself and had completed his peerage. They spent a few hours talking that day. Naruto only gave minor details regarding the members of his peerage. He decided to keep that information to himself for the time being. The real reason Naruto went to Ajuka that day though, was for information regarding the underworld. He wanted to know what had happened in the past few centuries. He wanted to be able to return with up-to-date knowledge so that he wouldn't be caught off guard by anything. More than anything though, Naruto wanted to know about his two childhood friends, Serafall and Serafall. He knew that after the Civil War they both became Maos along with Ajuka, but besides that, he knew nothing about them anymore. He was sad to admit that fact to himself, but to be fair, it has been 5 centuries since he's seen either of them. Flashback start. What can you tell me about Serafall, Ajuka-san? Naruto asked the green-haired Mao sitting across the table from him. Well, where do I begin? He responded in a joking voice before turning a bit more serious. Serafall is pretty much the same as he was before the wars, on the outside that is. He acts childish and playful. He always has a smile on his face and he's always trying to have fun. But on the inside, he's damaged. The wars changed him. After everything that he went through, we all went through, it changed him. He may appear carefree and playful, but in all honesty, I just think that's how he copes with everything, by acting as though life is a big game. It makes it easier for him to mask what he's truly thinking on the inside. Ajuka finished with a sad frown. What is he thinking on the inside then? Naruto asked cautiously. Honestly, I think he is afraid that another war will break out. The last great war between the 3 factions ended on strained terms at best. The peace we have at the moment is barely hanging by threads, and he is afraid that the illusion of peace will come crashing down around us. He's not afraid for himself though, because he knows what it's like to live during a time of war. He knows what it's like to fight for your life while seeing people around you lose theirs. No, what he's truly afraid of is that another war will come and his family will get caught in the middle of it, Ajuka explained. Didn't Lord and Lady Gremory take part in the previous wars? I assumed that even if they didn't directly take action on the battlefield, that they would have at least been involved in the political side of things, Naruto stated in confusion, which made Ajuka chuckle. You really have lost touch with the underworld, haven't you, Uzumaki-san? Ajuka asked jokingly, already knowing the answer to that question. It's not his parents that Serafall is worried for, it's his little sister, and his son. Naruto's eyes widened in shock and realization. He has a little sister. And a son? Naruto asked, surprised by the information. 17 years ago, Lord and Lady Gremory had another child, a baby girl that they decided to name Rias. Ajuka started to explain. Rias Gremory is now the new heir to the House of Gremory. Because Serafall became the Lucifer Mao, he had to give up all claims to his family clan, leaving the Gremorys without an heir. That was until they had Rias. Serafall absolutely adores his little sister. He would literally go to war if another faction so much as laid a hand on her. They are as close as a brother and sister can be, if you overlook the fact that she is completely embarrassed by his antics. Rias Gremory is growing up to become quite a strong young devil. And her peerage has potential to do great things, but she has grown up during a time of peace, meaning she doesn't really know how serious the world can be sometimes. Despite how much she has been taught about the seriousness of our past, there is only so much you can learn from history books. The rest has to be knowledge gained from experience, and Serafall never wants his sister to have to go through the things that we all went through. Ajuka finished with a bitter look on his face. I see, Naruto said while nodding his head. Then there is his son, Milikas, being the child of not only a Mao, but also a previous member of the old Satan faction. Serafall fears that someone may try to get to him by going after his son, Ajuka stated with a grim expression on his face. Naruto gritted his teeth in frustration. Even after all of this time, there were still evident threats to his friends. It made him so angry. You know, Serafall named you the godfather of his child, Ajuka told Naruto, distracting him from his thoughts. They kept it quiet, and not many people know about it, or who you are, but he knew that if you ever came back, he'd want you to be his son's godfather. Naruto's look softened as he heard this. Even though he didn't show it on his face, he was feeling a mixture of so much honor and guilt. He was so honored that Serafall wanted to name him the godfather of his son, yet he felt so guilty that he hadn't been there at all for the young boy. What about Serafall? Naruto asked, trying to change the topic away from his guilt. Any siblings or children to speak of? Ajuka started to chuckle again. No. This time he actually burst into laughter. His head shot back and the sound of humorous laughter filled the entire room. What? Naruto acts in confusion. do you remember what I told you about Serafall the last time we spoke? Ajuka asked between fits of laughter. She bought me a heap of birthday presents and now hates me for not returning. Naruto recalled while scratching the back of his head. He didn't do a very good job of avoiding his guilt. Ajuka stopped laughing and just stared at Naruto as if he was an idiot. The look on his face made Naruto think that he had just said the stupidest thing that Ajuka had heard in his entire life. What? Naruto acts again cautiously. You know what? I am just going to let you wait and find out yourself. Ajuka said with a mischievous smirk before continuing. No, she doesn't have any children, but she does have a little sister as well, in the same boat as the Gremory family. The Seatrees lost their heir when Serafall became the Leviathan Mao. The same year that Rias was born, the Seatrees also got their new heir, Sona Seatree. Just like Rias, Sona is becoming quite a powerful young devil. She doesn't have as much raw power as Rias, but what she lacks in strength, she more than makes up for in knowledge. Even though she's only 17 years old, she is fast becoming one of the most intelligent devils in the underworld. Given time, I believe that she will even surpass my level of knowledge. Ajuka finished with an approving smile. That's good to hear, Naruto said with a genuine smile. Is Serafall okay now though? After the wars, is she coping with everything, or is she in the same boat as Searzex, nervous about more conflict leading to a new war? He finished with a concerned frown. It's hard to answer that question. After everything calmed down, Serafall reverted to a childish version of herself. Don't get me wrong, she still takes her role seriously, but nobody has seen her in her adult form in centuries. She portrays herself as a carefree child, but if you ask me, she has serious abandonment issues, Ajuka admitted with concern evident in his voice. At hearing this, Naruto's frown grew. He knew that she would probably hate him for leaving for so long. Hell, he hated himself for abandoning his friends, but he didn't know it would affect her this much. Serafall is extremely overprotective of Sona. I think that she is afraid that if she isn't like that, then something might happen to her baby sister, and I don't think she could take losing another person that she cares so much about, Ajuka finished sadly. While Naruto knew that Ajuka was just telling it how it was, those words were still a dagger to his heart. To know that he hurt his childhood friend so much killed him. It's official, she is going to kill me, and I completely deserve it, Naruto thought to himself sadly. Is there anything else you can tell me? Naruto asks. Their conversation went for another hour or so before Naruto decided that he knew enough. With their conversation finished, Naruto left the underworld once again, promising Ajuka that before the next time they see each other, Naruto will have officially returned. Flashback end. To fill the time until he felt his peerage ready to return to the underworld, Naruto decided to do something that he knew he would come to regret. He was going to go to school, or more specifically, Kuo Academy. There wasn't much of a reason for him to attend the academy, and he had no intention of actually paying attention in any of the classes. No, the only reason he decided to go there was to meet a few certain individuals. Naruto thought that it would be easier to return to Devil Society if he had allies. Obviously he knew that Searzex and Serafall would stand by his side upon his return, but he felt the need to meet new people, people who didn't know about his past, people who could have the chance to judge him as the person he is now, not remember his as the person he was then. That is why Naruto enrolled at Kuo Academy. Ajuka told him that his friend's sisters, Rias and Sona, pretty much ran the academy. Because of this, he sent his queen to find them an apartment and get started at the academy as soon as he reincarnated his two new knights. She has been living in Kuo for the past month, and attending the academy to scout things out for when Naruto arrives. They could have just kept living in their personal dimension and teleported between it and Kuo instead of finding somewhere to live in the new city, but they decided against the idea. The fact that Naruto had pulled off such a seemingly impossible feat of creating his own personal world was a closely guarded secret that very few outside of his peerage were aware of. Besides from the chance to meet his best friend's siblings, there was another reason that he decided to attend Kuo. During the month that his queen had already been living in Kuo, she sensed the presence of multiple fallen angels and exorcists in the city. For a city under the control of not one, but two, high-class devil families, this couldn't be good news. So with all of the above reasoning, Naruto found himself waking up in a new bed, in a new apartment, in a new city. Kuo. Naruto woke up with a feeling of dread overwhelming his body. The day had finally arrived. For the first time his over 500-year life, he would be attending a normal school. His parents never allowed him any proper schooling when he was growing up, because apparently he didn't deserve it, so the only education he really got when he was a child were the odd occasions when his older half-brother got the chance to teach him things. A few decades ago he went to an actual academy, of sorts, but to him, it didn't count as a proper education institute. Yokai Academy, the school where he met his rook, was an interesting place, It was a school for monsters, otherwise known as supernatural beings of non-human origin, but that's a story for another time. Waking up this morning, Naruto realized that Kuo Academy will be the first proper educational institute that he's ever attended, and to say he was dreading classes was an understatement. He is an extremely powerful half-human, half-devil that is over 500 years old. He has traveled the entire human world and beyond. What the hell was he supposed to learn in a human school for teenagers? It's not that he had anything against education, he just found normal education boring. How could he not after the life had led? During the past 5 centuries, he spent most of his time training his body, practicing fighting styles, learning magical techniques and building up his peerage. Somehow, he didn't think learning calculus would benefit him very much. Now he was expecting himself from going from that life, to listening to teachers ramble on about random things that he had no interest in? Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. Naruto let out a sigh at the thoughts as he turned the corner and Kuo Academy came into his sights. He arrived in Kuo the previous night, and found his way to the apartment that his queen had found for them. The rest of his peerage was still in their personal dimension training and helping the newest members adjust. When he first arrived, his queen was extremely happy to see him. They spent a few hours catching up on how things had been going with the peerage, and she also informed him about everything that she had learnt since coming to Kuo. After their talk came to a close, she requested to have a few days away from Kuo so that she could spend some time with the peerage. While she had no issues with the task that had been assigned to her, she still missed her new family and wanted to spend a few days with them. With the use of magic, Naruto reverted his appearance to that of his teenage self, to help him fit in more among the teenagers that he would be attending school with. Even though he looked to be 17 years old, he maintained his height and physically impressive body. His hair was a bit shorter again, but still the sun-kissed, golden blonde color. When the academy came into his sights, he had to admit that it looked like a rather prestigious place. Just from where he was, walking towards the gates, he could see a large, modern, Western-style looking building that he assumed was the main school building. There was plenty of outdoor space that was currently filled with students socializing before their morning classes, and he could see a small hill that led up to a rather large sports field. As Naruto walked through the gates of the academy for the first time, he noticed the gazes of the other students turned to him. He figured that it was just because he was a new student, and obviously a foreigner because of his hair color. That was before he overheard the whispers with his increased hearing. Who is that? He's wearing the boy's uniform. Does that mean he's a new student? Don't be stupid. He looks like a man, not a boy. He's so tall. And handsome. I hope he's in my class. I hope he's single. These were just some of the more appropriate things that Naruto overheard coming from the girls staring at him with blushing cheeks and lust in their eyes. Then came the boys, and from what he overhears, their opinions on him were on the completely opposite end of the spectrum. Who the hell is that and why is he here? Not another pretty boy. It's already bad enough as it is. Not another blonde bastard. No. I won't let him get in my way. The last one came as more of a painful scream than a hushed whisper. Naruto turned his head in the direction of the noise and saw a brown-haired boy with tears streaming down his face, being restrained by 2 other boys as he was trying to approach Naruto. Naruto felt like bursting into laughter at the boy trying and failing to break free from his friend's grasps. Naruto could sense that the brown-haired teenager was a devil. He even got the feeling of a dragon from him, but dismissed the thought due to the power being so underwhelming. Naruto just gave the boy his brightest smile, and with a wave in his direction, kept walking towards the main school building. Let me go. I won't stand by and let another Casanova threaten my dreams of becoming the harem king. Naruto made it into the building when he heard this, and seeing that there weren't many people around, he leant against the wall of the corridor and burst into the laughter that had been keeping in since first seeing the boy. His laughter was cut short when he heard a bell ringing and people started filing into the building. With that, Naruto started in the direction of his first class. Later that day, the school day was now finished, and most of the students were making their way out of the academy grounds. Some, however, stayed at the academy most afternoons, for extracurricular reasons. 2 of these individuals are currently sitting in a large room with a chessboard between them. It's your move, Rias, one of the girls said to the other. The girl that just spoke is a young bespectacled woman in her late teens with a slim figure. She has black hair, styled in a short bob cut, and violet eyes. She is wearing the standard Kuo Academy girl's uniform, consisting of a white long-sleeved, button-down shirt with black vertical linings, a black ribbon collar, black shoulder cape, matching button-down corset and a magenta skirt with white accents. Oh sorry Sona, I am just a bit distracted at the moment. The girl now known to be Rias replied. Rias is a beautiful young woman who appears to be the same age as the other girl. She has a rather buxom figure and is wearing the same girl's uniform. Her eyes are a blue-green color, but the most eye-catching part of her appearance is her hair. Rias has long crimson hair that reaches down to her thighs. She has a single strand of hair sticking out from the top of her head and loose bangs framing her face. Is it about him? Sona asked with clear distaste, emphasizing her question. Rias was thrown off for a moment before realizing what her friend was referring to. Oh, no, it's not about that, it's about my new pawn, Issei, she finished with an exasperated sigh. What did the perv do now? Sona asked with an amused grin, earning a glare from the crimson-haired beauty. This morning he met a nun and Rias began but was interrupted by a knocking sound at the door. She looked up at her friend with a raised eyebrow only to see Sona shrug her shoulders. Come in. Sona called from her seat. The door opened slowly to reveal a smiling blonde-haired boy. Naruto walked into the room keeping the smile on his face, while in actuality he was using the short time until the surprise wore off to get a good look at the two girls in the room. He instantly recognized Rias due to the crimson hair that the Gremory clan is so well known for, and a few seconds later he recognized the other girl as Sona, even though she didn't look much like her sister. Apart from the hair color, as soon as they locked eyes, he almost thought it was Serafall looking back at him. Uzumaki-san. What are you doing here? Sona asked curiously. She met Naruto earlier in the day due to him being in one of her classes. Besides, from his obvious good looks, she couldn't sense any power coming from the blonde, so she just assumed that he was an ordinary transfer student. Rias, on the other hand, hadn't met Naruto yet. They didn't share any classes together during the day, and although she had heard multiple girls gossiping about the handsome blonde transfer student, this was the first time she'd seen him with her own eyes. Oh my Mao, he really is handsome. Rias thought to herself, hiding back a slight blush. Sorry, student council president, I hope I didn't interrupt anything. I was just hoping to speak with the two of you for a moment, Naruto said politely as he approached the table. You weren't interrupting anything at all, Rias said a bit too quickly, making Sona grin to herself. My name is Rias Gremory, it's a pleasure to meet you, Uzumaki-san. Seeing as he already met Sona in class, Naruto took the chance to introduce himself. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said politely with a slight bow. The pleasure is mine, Gremory-san, Citri-san. As soon as Naruto finished speaking, he realized he said something wrong. Rias' eyes widened a bit while Sona's narrowed slightly. He didn't know why, but he felt like he had said something wrong. As far as he knew, he introduced himself correctly and with a polite tone, so he was confused at seeing the two differing reactions from the girls sitting in front of him. He was even more confused to see them tense up a little while looking at him. Is there a problem? Naruto asked cautiously. Who are you, really? Sona asked in a serious tone, while Rias just stayed quiet. Surely she doesn't know who I really am. She wasn't even born when I left the underworld, so there's no way that she recognizes me, and if she recognized my name then she would have said something earlier in the day, wouldn't she? Naruto thought to himself while trying to think of what to say. I don't know what you mean, responded the blonde, trying to sound as clueless as possible. Cut the act. Sona said in a serious voice. It reminded Naruto so much of Lady Citri. In the human world I go by the name Suna Shitori. The only way that you can know my true name is if you know about the supernatural world. I can't sense any power coming from you, so you can't be a devil. So tell me, Naruto Uzumaki, who exactly are you? She finished with a no-nonsense or I'll-kick-your-ass kind of look on her face. Realizing his mistake, Naruto just laughed in spite of himself. Oops, the reason I recognized you as a Citri is because of your eyes. My eyes? Sona acts in confusion, clearly surprised by his response. Yep. You have the exact same eyes as your sister, Naruto told her warmly, making her blush slightly at the tone in his voice. What about me? Rias asked curiously. Even though she introduced herself properly, she was still curious if he already knew who she was. That, and she was a bit jealous that her friend was getting so much attention, even though she'd never admit it. With such beautiful red hair, you're obviously Sirzek's little sister and a Gremory, Naruto answered with a smile. Rias smiled at his comment and couldn't help the blush that crept its way onto her cheeks. How is it that you know how siblings? Sona asked curiously, to which Rias nodded to show she was wondering the same thing. Old friends, Naruto answered with such a genuine smile that both girls knew that he was telling them the truth. What did you want to speak to us about? Rias asked with interest. Seeing as this is your territory, I thought it would be appropriate for me to notify you that my queen and I are currently living in Kuo. The rest of my peerage are not currently in the city, but they will probably be coming along soon enough, Naruto answered in a polite tone. Wait, you never answered my question about being a devil. and considering you have a peerage, you must be one. But why can't I sense your magical signature? Sona acts in confusion and Rias just raised her eyebrow inquisitively. Over the past years I have developed a method of masking my magical signature. When you tried to get a read on me, you thought I was just an ordinary human, right? Naruto acts in Sona's direction. When she nodded he continued, that is because I can completely suppress my power, giving the illusion of humanity. Sona and Rias just listened, slightly in awe at such a unique ability. As far as both of them knew, something like this had never been done before. To say they were impressed would be an understatement. So you have a peerage? Rias asked happily. That must make you a high-class devil just like us, right? That would be correct. Naruto answered simply, I am not familiar with the name Uzumaki. Sona, have you heard of it before? Rias asked her friend. I can't say that I have, she admitted. It is rather strange to have never heard of the family name behind a high-class devil, Sona stated, even though it was more of a question. I guess they don't actually know about me, Naruto thought. Not all that surprising really. I did leave almost 5 centuries before they were born. I am not surprised that you've never heard the name Uzumaki, Naruto told them. Uzumaki was my mother's family name, a name not known to Devil Society. What about your father's name? Rias asked curiously. The entire time that had been talking to them, Naruto maintained a cool and collected demeanor, that of the relaxed and joyful teenager that he was pretending to be, but for the split second after Rias mentioned his father, his mask slipped, his smile stayed put, but his eyes flickered from joyful and carefree to eyes full of hatred and resentment. Sona didn't seem to notice his split-second lapse in character, but if the curious look Rias was sending his way was anything to go by, she certainly saw it, and was sending him a "what aren't you telling us?" kind of look. I would rather not mention that name, Naruto answered in a calm voice. I am no longer a part of that family, so I see no point in bringing their name into things. Besides, I am sure you'll both find out soon enough. Before Sona could say anything, Rias jumped in. Okay, Naruto-kun, she said with a sweet smile. Naruto was thankful that Rias had dismissed the subject, but slightly annoyed that she still had the "what aren't you telling us?" look on her face. Instead of dodging the bullet, it seems that he just postponed its impact. What made you come to Kuo? Sona asked him to keep the conversation going. I recently finished using all of my evil pieces. I wanted to give my newer members a bit more time to adjust to life as a devil before taking them with me to the underworld, so to pass the time I thought I'd go to school, he answered with half of the truth. While I detest school for the most part, I thought it would be a good opportunity to meet some fellow devils, he told them cheerfully. I suppose that makes sense, Sona said with an accepting nod of her head, although she wasn't a fan of him detesting school. I appreciate you allowing me to stay in your territory, Citree-san, Gremory-san, Naruto said genuinely before getting up and turning to the door. Before he could exit the room he was interrupted by Rias' voice coming from behind him. If you're interested in meeting some more devils, Naruto-kun, how would you like to meet my peerage? Rias asked hopefully. I'd like that, he answered happily. Great. Come by my clubroom tomorrow after class, it's the old school building just past the sports field, Rias told him with a happy smile on her face. I guess I'll see you tomorrow then, Naruto told her with a wave before leaving the room. Rias turned back to Sona and resumed her seat across the table from her. Rias, Sona said to get the Gremory's attention. When Rias looked up she was greeted by a knowing smirk on Sona's face. For some reason it made her feel uncomfortable, but she hid it and just tilted her head questioningly. I can't believe you have a crush on a guy you just met 5 minutes ago, Sona said in a teasing voice. I don't have a crush on him, Rias retorted with a red face. I just think he's attractive, she finished defensively. Tisk tisk. What would your fiancé think? Sona said with a grin. Ria's face instantly changed from smiling with blushing cheeks to an annoyed glare. I hate you. The next afternoon as Naruto was strolling towards the occult research club room he couldn't help but wonder to himself what it would be like to meet Rias' peerage. He treated his peerage more like family than servants. He was interested to see how other devils went about things, although from what he heard from Ajuka, the Gremories took much the same approach as him when it came to their servants. Still, it would be interesting to see how this meeting would go. As he approached the building, Naruto was distracted from his thoughts when he sensed that there were 3 magic signatures coming from inside. Must be the members of Rias' peerage, he thought to himself. Upon entering, he realized that it was an older version of the other school building and followed the direction of the magical signatures. He reached a door and knowing that there were 3 people on the other side, he knocked. Come in, he heard a voice call out curiously. Apparently they didn't get many visitors. Opening the door slowly, Naruto entered the room and took in his surroundings. There was a small table in the middle of the room with couches on either side, a large desk with a chair behind it on the far side of the room, and what looked like a shower curtain in one of the corners. It looked kind of creepy, but that's only to be expected. This is the occult research club room after all. He also noticed the 3 people he could sense before entering the room. Firstly was a beautiful girl with long black hair, who looked to be the same age as Rias, sitting on the large desk. She had violet eyes and like Rias also had a very nicely curved body. Secondly was a handsome-looking boy with short blonde hair, lighter in shade than Naruto's. He had gray eyes and was leaning against the wall near a window. Finally, sitting cross-legged on one of the couches and eating cake was a petite girl who looked a year or 2 younger than the others. She looked cute with gold eyes and white hair that had 2 bangs going down her front to her shoulder, several shorter bangs over her forehead and a bob cut around the back. He looked towards the white-haired girl for a few seconds longer than the others. For some reason her face seemed really familiar, even though he knew for a fact that had never met her before. Hello, Naruto said with a slight bow towards the 3 after deciding to figure out why the girl looked so familiar later. Era, what have we here? The black-haired girl asked while giggled into her hand. My name is Naruto. I am the new transfer student. It's my 2nd day here, Naruto explained in a friendly tone. It's nice to meet you, Naruto-kun. The girl with black hair continued flirtatiously. My name is Akino, tall, blonde and handsome. Over there is Kiba. She gestured to the blonde leaning against the wall who gave him a friendly wave. And this lovely little lady is Kaneko. She finished gesturing towards the girl sitting on the couch, who seemed either too distracted by her food or just disinterested by his presence. We don't often get visitors here in our club room, Kiba explained. What can we do for you? Rias Gremory asked me to meet her here, Naruto explained as he let the door close behind him as he walked further into the room. Oh? Bucko asked you to meet her here, did she? Akino inquired in what continued to sound like a flirtatious voice. Yes. Yesterday I met with her and the student council president. During our discussion, Rias asked me to visit after school today, he explained with a smile. Anyway, she suggested that I join the club. Apparently she thinks I'd fit in really well. He tried to fake as much enthusiasm as he could, and it was totally worth it when he saw the looks on their faces. Yep, they must be really confused now. Why would their president think that a human would fit in well with a club full of devils? He held back a laugh. This was too good an opportunity to pass up. That, and he always did enjoy playing pranks on people. Spotting something on the desk that Akino is sitting on, Naruto smiles as he thinks up the next part of his entertainment. How about a game? He asks her, gesturing towards the chess set. What? Why? Akino asks, now thoroughly confused. Why? Naruto repeats, faking a confused look. This is the chess club, isn't it? That's what Rias-chan told me, he elaborated, fighting the urge to burst out laughing. For the first time since entering the room, Naruto, though he caught the smallest of smiles appear on Kaneko's face, but if it did, it was quickly replaced by the usual stoic look. Oh, yeah, chess club, sure. Akino says, turning to the chess board and setting up the pieces. As she does, Naruto sees her give Kiba a look to which he just shrugs. Naruto walks past the desk and sits down in the large chair behind it, which he assumed was Rias' chair. Just before their game could begin, the door opened and Rias walked in. Hi guys, sorry I got a bit caught up on my way over here, she says, pausing when she looks over at the desk. What are you guys doing? She asked, tilting her head questioningly. Testing out the skills of the newest member of our chess club apparently, Akino explains with a confused look towards Rias. Rias thinks for a moment before the realization hits her. They can't sense that he's a devil, they think that he's just an ordinary human, Rias realized. She looks at Naruto and sees that he is obviously holding back laughter. Yes. She says excitedly, welcome to our chess CL. Before she could even finish the sentence, Naruto reached his limit and burst into laughter. Shortly after, Rias was also roaring along with his laughter, earning confused looks from Akino and Kiba. Kaneko still looked disinterested. Do one of you want to fill us in here? Akino asks desperately. Naruto-kun, why are you being so cruel to my peerage, and how dare you sit in my chair? Rias says in a mock serious voice. Sorry, I couldn't resist, it was just too easy to fool them, he chuckled. You're evil, Rias giggled in reply. We're still really confused here, Bucko, what's going on? It's not like you to tell a human about devils, let alone your peerage, Kiba said, completely confused by the situation. Before either of them could begin to explain, they were interrupted by the petite white-haired girl on the couch. He's not a human, she says as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. Making a mental note to ask her why she said that so confidently, Naruto smiled at both Akino and Kiba. Is he a new member of your peerage? Kiba asks excitedly. Unfortunately no, he is not, Rias answered with a slight frown. I may be asking a really silly question here, but why can't I sense his magical signature? Akino asks, still slightly confused by the whole situation. Before Naruto could answer, Rias beat him to it. Somehow he can completely hide his magical signature, masking the fact that he's a devil and appearing to be completely human. Era, cute, funny and mysterious, Akino says seductively while eyeing Naruto. If he wasn't used to this kind of thing coming from his rook, he probably would have blushed at the sight. Hands off Akino, Rias says in a stern voice, glaring at her queen. Naruto smiled at the interactions between Rias and her peerage. It reminded him somewhat of his own. Thinking about them made him miss his peerage a bit, but he knew that they would join him soon enough. So, what is the purpose of this meeting then? Akino asks, curious as to why a new devil was in the area. Naruto-kun is a high-class devil just like myself. He recently moved to Kuo and will be joining us at school until his peerage is ready to return to the underworld with him, Rias answered for him, using what little information that she gathered from their meeting the previous day. I thought it would be a nice idea to introduce him to you guys, so I invited him to join us for this afternoon. The rest of the afternoon was spent with Rias properly introducing the members of her peerage to Naruto. He learnt that Akino is Rias' queen, Kiba is her knight and Kaneko is her rook. She also told him that she has a pawn, Issei, but he was out on a contract at the time. They talked for a few hours, swapping stories and getting to know each other a bit better until the meeting was brought to an abrupt halt. Rias apologized to Naruto and told him that something had come up with her pawn and said that she had to go with her peerage immediately. Before they left, Rias told Naruto that he was welcome to visit them at any time, and with that they disappeared using the Gremory family's magical circle. The next afternoon Rias was alone in her clubroom after school the next day. Her peerage members were all out on contracts and she was taking the moment of quiet to think over the events of the previous night. Her pawn was lured into a trap by a stray exorcist that had killed the human who was trying to summon Issei. The madman then tried to kill Issei and he would have succeeded if the nun that Issei befriended didn't show up. The girl, Asia, was for some reason working for the crazy exorcist, and in pleading him to spare Issei's life, it bought enough time for Rias and her peerage to arrive. When they got there, Issei was in pretty bad condition. He was covered in his own blood and had holes in his legs from where the exorcist shot him with light bullets. Outnumbering the exorcist, they were able to save Issei easily enough, but he begged her to let Asia go with them. Unfortunately, her family's magic circle only allowed members of the Gremory family and their peerages to use them, and even if she could bring the girl with them, what was she supposed to do next? Asia was a nun and an avid believer in the biblical God. It would risk conflict between the factions if a nun was discovered to be interacting with devils, so she had to make the tough decision of leaving the girl behind. She felt guilty about it, because she could see that the blonde nun was as innocent as they come, but she had to do what was expected of her as a king, and member of the Gremory family. Issei was furious at her for leaving Asia behind. Even after she healed his wounds and explained why they couldn't bring Asia back with them, he still was angry. He understood what she was saying, but she knew that he was still depressed about the situation. She just hoped that he didn't try anything stupid and... Knock knock. Rias jumped in her chair after hearing the knock at the door. She was so deep in thought that she didn't sense anyone come into the building. Come in, she called out, curious as to who was on the other side of the door. To her surprise, Naruto opened the door and walked in with a smile on his face. Hey Rias-chan. Naruto-kun? What are you doing here? She asked with a confused smile. You told me to visit at any time. I didn't have anything planned for this afternoon, so I thought I'd come and see what you were up to, he answered simply. Oh, that's right. Sorry I forgot, she said, slightly embarrassed. I've been a bit distracted today. After last night, she finished with a slight frown on her face, which didn't go unnoticed by Naruto. What happened? You guys seemed pretty tense last night when you left so abruptly, he asked her with a bit of concern in his voice. Rias looked up at her fellow devil. Usually the only people she'd talk to about things like this were Akino or Sona, but for some reason she felt like she could talk to Naruto about it. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but for some unknown reason, she trusted him, even though they only met a few days ago. Letting a sigh, Rias started explaining what was on her mind. A few days ago, Issei met a nun named Asia Argento. For some reason they became very close friends in such a short amount of time, and Issei seems to really care about her. Naruto nodded along attentively while patiently waiting for her to continue. I warned him to stay away from her. Being part of the church raises obvious concerns about their interactions, but I didn't think it would become an issue. Until last night, that is, she explained, her frown growing slightly. Last night Issei was working a contract. When he arrived, the human that summoned him was dead. he had been brutally murdered by a stray exorcist. Naruto's eyes narrowed at hearing that. He has had plenty of run-ins with stray exorcists over his time, some worse than others, but he hadn't met any that took it so far as to murder humans just for summoning a devil. Rias was caught slightly by surprise at seeing Naruto's eyes change to annoyance and anger. They depicted someone who held a lot of resentment, and the look slightly reminded her of how he reacted when she asked about his father. She decided to file the thoughts away for later and continue on with the issue at hand. The exorcist attacked Issei and would have killed him if it hadn't been for the timely intervention of Asia, Rias told him, which surprised him a bit. For some reason, Asia came to this town and is working for a group of fallen angels. When she saw Issei, she begged the crazy exorcist to spare him, and in doing so bought us enough time to arrive and rescue Issei. Seeing her still frowning, Naruto asks, if Issei is okay now, then what's the problem? Issei feels very attached to Asia, maybe even more so than he does to us, Rias said dejectedly, letting out a sigh. He wanted me to bring the girl with us, but you couldn't do that without risking conflict between the factions, Naruto interrupted, nodding his head with a frown. I fear that Issei will do something stupid, like confront the fallen angels and try to save the girl, Rias said with concern evident in her voice. Why don't you let him? Naruto asks, smiling once more. Rias looked up at Naruto with confusion covering her face. Even if he was capable of rescuing the girl, what would happen next? We'd have a group of pissed off fallen angels coming after us, and members of the church wouldn't be happy about the situation either. They attacked a member of your peerage, in your territory. I think that makes any action you take against them completely justified. Naruto started to explain, if you let Issei fight for his friend, it will help him become a stronger person as well, because a person is at their best when they have something to fight for, and, if you helped him, that would only make things even better for you in the long run. Not only would it greatly increase his chance of success, but it would increase his loyalty to you as well. Instead of being the master who is stopping her servant from helping his friend, he'll see you as a friend who is helping him fight for someone important to him. Rias took in Naruto's advice and smiled in admiration at his words. Those are some extremely wise words for someone so young. Naruto couldn't help but smile at her words. I never actually told you how old I am. Slap Issei. Don't ever ask me to release you from my household, Rias snapped with a hurt expression on her face while lowering her palm from Issei's cheek. Of course not. I am your precious pawn, Issei drawled sarcastically, while the other members of the occult research club, minus Akino, watched the scene uncomfortably. You can't do without your most important piece, can you? That's enough, Issei, Rias said, raising her voice to silence him. Issei flinched at the tone in her voice and realized that he went too far when he saw the hurt look on Rias' face. Pawns are important. They're not the weakest piece by any means, Rias told him while taking a deep breath to calm herself down. Do you remember when I told you that my evil pieces have the same attributes as chess pieces? Yeah, but so what? What can a stupid pawn do? Issei asked dejectedly. Quite a lot, she answered, getting his attention. If a pawn goes deep enough into enemy territory, they can be promoted to any other piece besides the king. Issei's eyes widened in realization. So does that mean, eventually I can have all the same powers as everyone else? Yes, but only if the master declared the place enemy territory, say for example the fallen angels' church, she explained slowly, hoping that he was taking the hint. So you're saying that Issei started before being interrupted by Akino entering the room and walking straight to Rias. Akino stopped behind her king and whispered something in her ear so that the others couldn't hear her. Something has come up. Akino and I have to step out for a moment, Rias said as her and Akino walked towards the magic circle in the middle of the room. Wait a minute. I have more questions for you, Issei pleaded. Issei, just remember, even if you're promoted, to no matter which rank, you cannot do everything on your own. Before he could even comprehend what she had just said to him, Rias and Akino disappeared with the familiar red light of the Gremory magic circle. In a small forest near the edge of Kuo, Naruto was leaning against a tree in the shadows, observing the abandoned church in the distance. It was getting pretty late and the sun had already dropped past the horizon, so it was fairly dark under the trees and away from the moonlight. He noticed a flash of red to his right and turned his glance to see Rias and Akino arriving a few meters away from him. How'd it go with Issei? Naruto asked, turning his attention back towards the church. Fine, Rias answered. I think he took the hint, and even if he didn't, Kiba and Kaneko are there to help him. Are you sure this is a good idea, bucko? Akino asked the crimson-haired devil cautiously. It was a bit surprising for Naruto to see Akino like this. In all the times that had seen her so far, she'd always been laid back, happy and even flirtatious, especially flirtatious. It was nice to see that she was so concerned for her friends. Yes, I believe this to be best course of action to take, Rias answered confidently. I have faith in Naruto-kun's plan, she added, making Naruto smile to himself. Seeing Akino accept her king's words, Naruto decided to speak up. There are 3 fallen angels in the forest a bit closer to the church. They seem to be guarding the back entrance. There is a stray exorcist in the church, with another 50 or so underneath. There is also another fallen angel under the church, so whatever tonight's main event is, my guess says that it's taking place down there, he told them. Very well. When the others arrive, we'll engage the 3 out here, to give them time to get inside, Rias said, and Naruto just nodded his agreement. 10 minutes later, Akino broke the silence. Bushu, I can sense Issei, Kiba and Kaneko approaching the front of the church. Alright, let's get this started then, she replied while moving towards the church with Akino following her and Naruto not far behind them. This is the worst. Standing guard is the most boring thing ever. They heard a voice come from ahead of them. Looking up, they saw a short girl with blonde hair, tied in twin tails. The girl was sitting on the branch of a tree and looking towards the church. Technically you're sitting, Naruto called out jokingly, making Rias and Akino both giggle despite the situation they were entering. The short girl spun around and jumped to the ground. She was wearing a black Lolita dress with white frills, a large black bow on the front and a green jewel embedded on the collar. She had white thigh-high socks, black shoes and a large black bow on top of her hair. Hi there. I am Mittelt and I am totally the most awesome fallen angel in the history of ever. The girl called out happily while curtsying to them. This little girl is really into herself, isn't she? Akino stated while giggling into her hand. Rias just smiled and Naruto snickered from behind them. A tick mark appeared on Mittelt's forehead as she glared at them. Whatever. What are you doing here? She demanded. I hope you are not here for a little rescue operation, because there are a lot more of us than there are of you. Even if you are, you'll have to deal with me first. I may be little, but I promise you this much, I pack a mean punch, she finished confidently. We already have 3 of our members entering the front of the church, Rias replied calmly. What? The blonde girl yelled out before letting go a sigh of frustration. It doesn't matter. You're the leader of this little group, so if we take you out then they'll be on a trip to Useless Town, and sorry to disappoint, but I am bringing friends to this party. She called out while spinning around and revealing her black feathered fallen angel wings. As soon as she finished, a purple light appeared next to her, and when it disappeared it revealed 2 more fallen angels. One of them was a tall buxom woman with long, navy blue hair, wearing a violet trench coat which revealed most of her chest, and a short mini skirt to show off her long legs. The third member of their group was a middle-aged looking man with short black hair. He was wearing a pale violet trench coat over a white dress shirt with a matching ascot, black pants, shoes and a black fedora. Good work, Middled, came a feminine voice from the blue-net fallen angel. It looks like we meet again, Lady Grimori. You should have kept your servant in line, the male fallen angel told her in an arrogant voice. It seems clear to us that your intention here is to interrupt our ritual, and that we can't allow. The 2 new fallen angels brought their wings out and jumped up into the air. Akino. Rias called in a calm voice, already on it. The raven-haired queen replied joyfully, raising her hand to the sky. Naruto was caught by surprise when lightning appeared out of nowhere, striking Akino's raised arm. Instead of harming the raven-haired girl, it seemed to empower her, and when the flash cleared, Akino was sporting a completely new attire. Instead of her Kuo Academy girl's uniform, now she was wearing traditional Miko clothing, consisting of a white haori with red accents, a red hakama, and a pair of zori with white tabi. Naruto let out a soft whistle at seeing the transformation. Akino truly did depict an ideal Japanese woman. Hey, no fair. I wasn't told that we could wear cosplay outfits. Mittelt called out angrily. You look like a miniature French maid, Naruto deadpanned, making Rias and Akino giggle once again. Akino then raised both of her arms and focused her demonic energy. Out of nowhere, a dome made out of small red circles, in the shape of the Grimori family crest, appeared around them. A barrier, the male fallen angel growled in annoyance. That's right, Rias responded cheerfully, and the only way to get past it is to defeat the 3 of us. Catching my prey in a cage just gets me so hot, Akino purred with a blush on her cheeks and electricity tracing around her hand. Oh crap, not another sadist. Naruto thought to himself, I have to make sure I keep her and Inner Chan away from each other. Enough of these games. The middle-aged man called out, it's time for you 3 to die. After his declaration,
The three fallen angels all conjured a spear of light into their hands. Before hurling them straight towards Rias, Naruto was about to intervene, but stopped when he saw the smile on Rias' face.
As the three spears were about to hit the Gremory heiress, she flared her power, surrounding herself in a shroud of pure red and black energy. Looks like she inherited the power of destruction from Lady Gremory, Naruto thought to himself with a smile. The power surrounding Rias disintegrated the spears on light. She gathered the power in front of her between her hands before looking up towards the three fallen angels. You lose, she stated simply before unleashing her power upon them. The beam of red and black destruction cut through the air at a tremendous pace. Naruto watched it happen with an impressed look on his face. Sirzex must be so proud of his little sister, he thought genuinely. The male fallen angel was quick to think and dived down towards the ground, avoiding the beam of energy. Middlet and the Bluenet, however, weren't quite so lucky. The beam of destructive energy hit them head on and they didn't even have time to scream out in pain before they were disintegrated. All that remained of them were a few black feathers that slowly floated down towards the ground. You bitch. The male growled in fury as he conjured another spear of light, sending it straight at Rias' chest. Rias was about to jump out of the way, but didn't need to when the spear stopped mid-air. Rias and Akino's eyes widened in surprise at what they saw. In a split second, Naruto disappeared from behind them, before reappearing in front of Rias, stopping the spear of light by catching it in his bare hands. What made the sight even more impressive was the fact that Naruto didn't even look fazed by the spear, even though simply touching it should be burning his skin.
How? Rias and Akino both wondered in awe. Naruto discovered many centuries ago that by focusing on the human blood running through his veins, not only could he mask the fact that he was a devil, but he could also make himself immune to most of the weaknesses that devils possess. So by focusing on his human blood now, he easily caught the spear of light and snapped it in half, dropping it to the ground.
You are weak, Naruto said in a cold tone as his eyes hardened, looking towards the male fallen angel glaring at him. If you leave this place right now I will let you live, however if you stay, I cannot guarantee your safety. Rias and Akino shivered at the sound of Naruto's cold emotionless voice. Never before have they heard him talk like that. They were just glad that he was not their enemy. The fallen angel on the other hand flinched under his gaze before regaining his composure. You son of a bitch. How dare you? He didn't get the chance to finish his sentence as he felt a strong hand grip around his throat, slamming him painfully into a tree. What? I didn't even see him move. Rias though in awe at the speed Naruto had just displayed. Never speak poorly of my mother, Naruto growled, tightening his grip around the other mon's throat.
Let go of me, you filth. The fallen angel struggled to breath while being pinned against the tree.
Rias felt a dark energy flood the area, and if Akino's shaking hands were anything to go by, she felt it too. The power felt so dense that it was actually becoming hard to breathe. She looked towards Naruto, who looked completely unaffected by the overwhelming force. It's as if he can't even feel this energy, Rias thought before her eyes widened in shock. No way. This energy is coming from him?
I gave you a chance and you took it for granted. Just die. Rias and Akino heard Naruto mutter in an ice-cold and emotionless voice. The fallen angel was then surrounded by pitch-black flames. Even from where she was standing, Rias could feel the incredible heat coming from the flames and actually had to take a few steps back, afraid that it would burn her skin. The fallen angel screamed in pain for a split second before he was silent. Naruto pulled his hand back and the once fallen angel fell to the ground, nothing but a small pile of ash. What the hell was that? Akino asked with a mix of terror and lust in her voice, while a small blush crept onto her cheeks. Hearing Akino's voice, Naruto immediately snapped out of his mood and the immense power flooding the area disappeared. He sighed quietly to himself. He didn't want to show off any of his power before returning to the underworld, but the one thing that he would never tolerate was someone insulting his mother.
Sorry about that, Naruto apologized, his voice back to the calm and friendly tone that they were used to. He turned back around to face them with a smile on his face. For a split second, Rias thought that she saw one of Naruto's eyes change from a blood-red color to the usual azure blue. I must be seeing things, she thought to herself. Naruto-kun. What was that? Rias asked Naturo with a cautious tone. A story for another time, he answered with a sigh, but for now, don't we have somewhere to be? Rias hesitantly nodded her head in acceptance and turned to Akino, asking her to bring down the barrier so that they could check in on how things were going inside the church. Akino did as she was asked and soon the three devils were headed towards the abandoned church. Naruto led the way, with Rias and Akino walking quickly behind him. The whole way there, they couldn't pry their curious eyes away from him. Inside the church, this one's for Asia. Issei screamed out in rage as he unleashed a devastating punch at the final fallen angel of the group. Said fallen angel had a pure look of shock on her face before being sent flying through a window. Issei was about to collapse from exhaustion before being caught by Kiba. Kiba lifted Issei's arm over his shoulder to help steady the brown-haired devil. Look at you. Handling that all on your own, Kiba said to Issei in an impressed tone. Yeah, thanks. What held you up? Issei axed back. I was instructed to stay back. Rias orders. Sorry. Kiba answered, feeling a little guilty. Seriously? Issei asked while his face took on a surprised expression. Seriously. Rias answered, making Issei turn around in surprise to see her leaning the wall a few meters away from him. I believed in you. I knew you would defeat her, she finished with a warm voice.
You did? Issei asked with a slight blush. Once our business was finished, she said, gesturing to Akano standing beside her and then Naruto, who was leaning against the door to the abandoned church. We arrived just in time to see Kiba and Kaneko having a free-for-all with a bunch of stray exorcists. Once that was taken care of, we made our way up here and saw you fighting the fallen angel, she explained.
What's he doing here? Issei acts in confusion, looking towards Naruto. It may have come across as rude to some, but Issei was genuinely just confused. He wasn't there the previous afternoon when Naruto visited the clubroom, and as far as he knew, Naruto was just a new transfer student. Well, explain that later. For now, though, we have some business to attend to, she told him as Kaneko returned with the body of the final fallen angel. Kaneko walked towards Rias and simply dropped the fallen angel at her feet, maintaining her usual stoic look. You must be Rainier. I am Rias Gremory, also known as the next heir to the noble house of Gremory, Rias announced in a proud voice. It's wonderful to meet you. What a shame we don't have time to chat. It's time for you to join your friends. When she finished talking, Rias opened her hand, releasing a few black feathers to slowly float towards the ground. The fallen angel, now known as Rainier, adopted a look of horror on her face.
Your friends tried to stop us. We warned them that it wasn't a very good idea, but they insisted. This is what remains of the two girls, Rias explained. A hopeful look made its way onto Rainier's face. It didn't last long though as Rias continued talking. Unfortunately, there's absolutely nothing left of the fourth member of your group, she finished and turned her glance slightly in Naruto's direction.
Why would the heiress of Gremory dare such a thing? Rainier asks.
I am completely justified in my actions, don't you think? You dare come into my territory and attack members from my household. I think the better question here is why you dared to do something so stupid. Rias fired back, flaring her power slightly. Issei, please, came a soft and innocent voice, making Naruto raise a curious eyebrow. Where the matured and sinister-looking woman sat a second ago, was now a cute-looking teenage girl. I am sorry. I know I said some mean things to you, but I didn't have a choice. I had to fulfill my role as a fallen angel, she pleaded as tears started to well up in her eyes. Why Yuma? Issei said before a pained expression crossed his face and his fists clenched. I mean, if I really didn't care, would I still be wearing your gift? She asked while gesturing to a red scrunchy bracelet on her arm. Please don't tell me you forgot. Why you bought it for me, remember? Now the tears were freely running down her face, don't you remember? Issei recoiled in shock before frowning. Why do you still have that? He demanded. How could I possibly get rid of this? It reminds me of, she started in a soft voice before stopping and coughing up blood. All the members of Rias Peerage blinked and stepped back in surprise. 1 second Yuma was sitting there pleading for her life. A split second later Naruto appeared in front of her, stabbing a translucent blade of black energy straight through her chest. Yuma started before coughing up more blood. This is the fairest punishment you will ever receive for your transgressions, Naruto whispered in a soft tone, only just loud enough for the rest of the devils to hear. He then pulled the blade out from her chest. For a moment she simply stared back up into the soft blue eyes gazing down at her, then the life drained from her eyes and she collapsed. Is that a? Rias started to ask in shock before Issei interrupted her. Asia, he cried out, running to a bench which had the unconscious form of a cute young blonde girl on it. Dismissing the blade, Naruto caught a green orb floating above the dead fallen angel. Inside the orb were 2 rings. I think these should be returned to their owner, Naruto said in a soft tone as he approached the group of devils surrounding the body of the blonde nun. Issei gave Naruto a look filled with sadness and gratitude. He took the rings from Naruto and placed them on Asia's fingers. He then broke down into tears, clutching the girl in his arms protectively. Asia, I am so sorry, he mumbled in a depressed tone. Asia, please forgive me.
You have nothing to apologize for, Issei Rias told him in a caring voice. But I failed her, he said while continuing to shed tears.
Naruto stood back to observe the scene. A frown made its way onto his face. He hated when things like this happened. He wanted to try and do something to help, but this was an issue for Rias and her peerage to solve. Besides, he had a pretty good idea what was going to come next anyway.
Issei, have you ever seen one of these before? Rias asked him after pulling a small white chess piece out of her pocket. A chess piece? Issei asked in strained confusion. Yes, it is. A bishop to be more precise, she explained. This is one of my evil pieces. Issei's eyes widened in realization, and from across the room Naruto couldn't help but smile. Does that mean? Issei started to ask, with a sliver of hope entering his voice. Yes, it does. Rias answered with a caring smile. She knelt down to join Issei, who was still clutching the blonde girl in his arms. She placed the white bishop piece on the girl's chest before standing back to her feet and holding out her hand. In the name of Rias Gremory, I call to Asia Argento, hear my command. Return thy soul from the shadows of death to the human realm. Rise once more as my servant. Join me by becoming a bishop for the noble house of Gremory. A handsome man who appeared to be in his early 20s is currently walking through a grand hallway in a large castle. Although the monk's appearance looked young, he had an air about him that gave off a very mature and grown-up vibe. This is slightly ironic considering how he usually acts, but not today. Today he has his serious face on. Today he is extremely angry. Sears X Lucifer, formerly known as Sears X Gremory, has grown into a handsome-looking man with shoulder-length crimson hair and blue-green eyes, similar to those of his little sister. He is currently wearing a professional-looking business suit and walking at a brisk pace with a serious look on his face. The reason for said expression is because he is on his way to a meeting with his father, Lord Gremory, the current head of the Gremory family. Upon arriving, he knocks on the door to his father's main study and waits to be called inside. Come in, a voice that he recognized as his father's called from inside the room. Entering the room, Sears X saw that Lord Gremory is sitting behind the main desk with official paperwork in front of him. Lord Gremory is a middle-aged-looking man with long crimson-red hair and some slight stubble on his chin. The only other person in the room is a beautiful young woman looking to be the same age as Sears X. She has long silver hair and is currently wearing a maid's attire. This woman is Graphia Lucifuge, Sears X's queen, wife, and also the head maid to the House of Gremory. Usually Graphia would be by Sears X's side at all times, but today she had been summoned earlier by Lord Gremory to cater to their meeting. That is why she is currently walking around the desk pouring cups of tea for the two crimson-haired devils. Sears X smiles towards his wife while entering the room fully and closing the door behind him. Being the strict and proper woman that she is, Graphia simply nodded in reply. Whilst on duty, she took her job extremely seriously, and refused to take advantage of the fact that she is Sears X's wife. What is the meaning of this meeting? Sears X asked in a calm voice, although on the inside he was seething due to having a pretty good idea towards the purpose of today's discussion. I just wanted to let you know that the schedule around Rias' engagement is being brought forward, Lord Gremory answered in an equally calm voice. Graphia has now finished what she was doing and has moved to stand behind her husband. To observe the conversation taking place, she couldn't deny the fact that she was surprised with her husband's behavior. Usually he acts like a child and she has to reprimand him because of his behavior, but at the moment he has an air of seriousness around him that she isn't used to seeing. Don't get her wrong. She has seen a Sears X in his serious mode plenty of times, but these days it's less and less often. Why? You promised her that she had until she finished university in the human world, Sears X replied with annoyance in his tone. As true as that may be, we don't see the point in waiting that long anymore. It makes no difference whether it happens in a few years' time of a few days, Lord Gremory stated calmly. You know that Rias will never forgive you if you force this onto her, Sears X stated with some anger finding its way into his voice. This is for her own go, Lord Gremory started before. Slam. Lord Gremory flinched at what just happened while Graphia jumped slightly in surprise. Sears X just stood up from his chair and slammed his hands down on the desk in front of him, causing a loud slam sound and interrupting Lord Gremory mid-sentence. Don't you dare say that this is for her own good, Sears X said in a cold tone. Lord Gremory leant back into his chair with a sigh, knowing that this was going to happen. In the meantime, Graphia stood forward with the intention of reprimanding her husband for his inappropriate behavior. She was about to pull his ear painfully and remind him to be more respectfully, when she was stopped in her tracks. Stand down, Graphia, Sears X said in an equally cold tone as the one he just used to address his father. Graphia froze in her tracks, Recognizing that voice, it wasn't the voice he used when he was asking her to do something, it was the voice he used when he was ordering her to do something. The voice was that of a king giving an order that cannot be disobeyed. It is extremely rare for Sirzex to use that voice, even more rare for him to use it towards her, so with that, she lowered her hand and stood back to continue observing the scene in front of her.
Sirzex, we've been over this multiple times, Lord Grimory said in a solemn voice. I don't care, Sirzex snapped in reply, further surprising Grafia. No matter how many times we go over this situation, I will never accept it. This marriage contract has been in effect since before you were both born. For over 5 centuries we have been waiting for an opportunity to join the houses of Grimory and Phenex, and this is the first actual chance that we've had. I am sorry that you can't bring yourself to accept it, but Rias and Riser will be joined, Lord Grimory told him in a voice that said there was no room for further discussion.
Sirzex ignored the tone in his father's voice and continued to debate the situation. I will not let you force Rias into that family, Sirzex said with venom clear in his voice. You should hold such biased opinions, especially in your position as Mao, Lord Grimory replied, his voice rising a bit in volume for the first time. What about what they did to him? Sirzex growled vehemently. Grafia was once again surprised with the tone coming from Sirzex. She didn't know what exactly was going on, but she was taken aback by her husband's attitude. She knew that he was overprotective of his little sister, and she knew that he was not a fan of the marriage contract, but she didn't know that he would go so far to protest it. Also she was very curious as to who he was referring to in his last statement. Lord Grimory's features instantly softened and he let out a sigh. Sirzex, that happened a long time ago. Besides, there was never any proof that what you said actually happened. At hearing this, Sirzek's face darkened and his eyes were hidden behind his hair.
After you told us what happened to Naruto, we went straight to the Phenex household to investigate. Lord Phenex denied yours and Serafall's claims, and it's not like we could ask Naruto himself, he finished with a frown.
Of course he denied it. Sirzex yelled, making Lord Grimory flinch once again. And did you honestly expect Naruto to return to the man that tried to murder him? I am sorry, but there just wasn't enough for us to go off. If Naruto stayed around so that we could hear his side of the story, then maybe we could have done something. But it was the word of 2 children against the word of the Phoenix clan, Lord Grimory stated with sorrow in his voice. Sirzex took a deep breath to calm himself down before continuing. No, it was the word of your own son against the word of that arrogant, pure-blood elitist.
Lord Grimory let out another sigh. There is nothing that can be done about the situation. Everything is already sorted and Grafia will meet with Rias in few days' time to inform her of the situation. With those words, Sirzex spun around and headed for the door. He opened it and was about to leave when he stopped and turned his head back towards the room.
If you go through with this, Rias will no longer be your daughter and I will no longer be your son. You will be throwing away Rias' happiness and you will lose all of the respect that I have for you, not only as a father, but also as a person, he said in a blank tone with his face void of emotion.
With that he left the room, slamming the door behind him.
After leaving the Grimory castle, Sirzex took some time to calm down before deciding what to do next.
He hated the situation so much. He is the most powerful devil in the underworld. He is one of the 4 leaders to devilkind and he is known as a hero from the previous wars, yet even with so many titles, one of the most important one to him was that of being a brother. After the Great War and the Civil War, Sirzex took a long time to recover mentally. He wore a mask that depicted a careless child, but it was just that, a mask. On the inside he felt broken, he felt empty. Grafia played a major role in fixing those problems, but even with her love and support, there was still something missing. That all changed when his little sister was born. The first time he held Rias in his arms, his baby sister, he felt whole again, the innocence in her eyes, the way she cutely tried to grab his finger with her tiny hands, the way she giggled when he ticked her, these things filled that void that had been plaguing him for so long. It was the absence of innocence. She gave him something to protect, something to fight for, her innocence and her freedom, and from the very first time he held her in his arms, he promised her that he would do everything within his power to protect her. That was why this situation infuriated him so much. Since becoming the Lucifer Mao, he had to swear indifference to the 72 pillars. This was for them to protect themselves against favoritism, and while it made sense and he could agree with it, he hated the fact that it was now stopping him from stepping in to help Rias. When he was summoned by his father, he decided to try one final time to change his mind. While it is true that Lord Grimory was very fond of Naruto, the fact is that there was never any proof behind Sirzek's claims. There was only the word of Sirzex and Serafall. You'd think that Lord Grimory would accept Sirzek's word, But growing up, Searsex showed an active dislike towards the Phenex family for their treatment towards Naruto when the rest of Devil Society wasn't around to see it. So Lord Phenex just accused Searsex of trying to cause him trouble, and Lord Grimoire reluctantly had to agree with his old friend.
Unfortunately, back when they were teenagers, Searsex and Serafall's words didn't mean as much as they do now, and even if they tried to bring what happened to Naruto back up, it wouldn't make much difference. Hardly anyone even knows who Naruto is anymore, especially with the Phenex family actively denying his existence.
That is why Searsex is now arriving in the Occult Research Club's clubroom at Kuo Academy. He promised that he would always protect his little sister, so, reputation as a Mao be damned, he had to try and do something. At the same time, on the other side of the Kuo Academy, Naruto was headed towards the student council room.
It has been a few days since the church incident and Naruto has been maintaining a low profile. As soon as the business in the abandoned church was wrapped up, Rias tried to interrogate him.
Naruto let out a sigh at memory. Rias tried to demand answers from him. He brushed it off and ignored her questions, but he felt bad about doing so. She wanted to know how a devil could easily catch and then destroy a spear of light. She wanted to know what the black flames he used against Danesek were, and she wanted to know about the weapon he used on Rainier.
After refusing to answer every one of her questions, she demanded for him to tell her who he really was and what his intentions in Kuo were. She then followed up by demanding to know how he knew her brother and what the nature of the relationship was.
After refusing to answer those questions as well, he wished them good luck with their newest member and teleported away, hence why he had been keeping a low profile, to avoid any further questioning from Rias or her peerage. That is why he was now heading towards the student council room. He wanted to talk to Sona and get to know her a little bit. Since their first meeting, she seemed so much different to how he remembered Serafall. In fact, she reminded him more of Lady Citri more than anyone else. If he was being completely honest with himself, he actually just missed Serafall, so in the meantime he decided to visit her little sister in an attempt to fill that void. Classes had finished for the day, so the corridors of the main school building were practically empty with only a few other students wandering around. When he arrived at the student council room, he knocked on the door a few times, and waited to be invited in. When he heard a feminine voice call out, he opened the door and entered the room.
Upon entering, he noticed that Sona was the only person in the room. She was sitting behind a desk with a lot of paperwork in front of her. She looked up when he closed the door behind him and watched him curiously as he approached her position. Citri-san. Good afternoon, he greeted politely with a respectful bow. Uzumaki-san. What can I do for you? She asked curiously. Nothing in particular, I just thought I'd come and see what you were up to. I hope that I am not interrupting anything. Naruto asked with a smile while gesturing to the chair in front of him. No, it's fine, she answered with a nod, letting him know that he could sit down and join her. What are you up to? He asked her while looking at the piles of paperwork covering her desk.
I am preparing for the Young Devils gathering. It may still be quite a while away, but I want to be as prepared as possible, she answered simply while moving papers into different piles.
Oh? That's where you declare your future ambitions, correct? He clarified. Ajuka mentioned something about it when they last spoke, but he didn't go into great detail. Indeed, that is correct, Sona replied. She had finished moving the papers around and while using a hand to adjust her glasses, she looked up at him.
What is your ambition? He asked her, curious as to what her answer would be. Sona hesitated for a moment. Naruto is pretty much a stranger to her, so usually she wouldn't open up about her future goals, but there was just something about him that she couldn't quite put her finger on. Something about his presence made her want to talk to him, and from her talk the other day with Rias, she felt the same way. So for some unknown reason, she took a deep breath, and began explaining her dream to Naruto. I want to open a school in the underworld to teach devils about raiding games, Sona told him. Isn't there already a place like that though? Naruto asked her in confusion. There is. However, it is only available to high-class devils, she explained. My dream is to open a school that is available to all classes of devil. That way it won't just be high-class devils that have the knowledge, but reincarnated devils as well. Naruto nodded along attentively. Hearing the conviction in her voice, he couldn't help but let a small smile appear on his face. The way I see it is, if reincarnated devils have a place where they can learn about the history of raiding games, along with strategy and tactics, they will be more useful to their king, because they would be able to help devise plans, she continued. It has always been a passion of mine. It is even the reason why I came to Kuo. I wanted to experience a place like this so that I knew what it was like to attend a normal school. She paused for a moment and Naruto saw a slight frown cross over her face. But,
I don't know if I will be able to achieve my goals, she admitted with a bit of sadness entering her voice. What makes you say that? Naruto asked her. 1 minute she was confident and full on conviction, the next she seemed like it was a lost cause. I just know that many devils will look down on my dream. A lot of devil society, especially the elders, look down on reincarnated devils. They are afraid that with more and more reincarnated devils being brought into the underworld, they will soon lose their positions of power, Sona replied dejectedly. Naruto sighed at hearing this. He knew all too well about the prejudices that were held by devil elitists. He was raised surrounded by it after all. Even though he isn't a reincarnated devil, it was the same principle. To those who were obsessed with maintaining a pure-blooded devil society, anyone who is different is a threat, and will most likely face discrimination. I believe your dream to be admirable, Naruto stated, causing Sona to look up at him. I also believe that if you stick to your dream, you will be overcome any obstacle in your way to achieve it. Sona couldn't help but smile slightly at his words. He sounded so genuine that she even believed it herself. If he could so confidently say that she could achieve her dreams, then she would believe it too. What is your dream, Uzumaki-san? Sona asks, curious as to what it may be. Naruto was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer her question.
My dream is to live a peaceful and happy life with the people that I care about, he finally answered with a smile.
Hearing his dream, Sona couldn't help but smile once again. To her, it didn't seem all that ambitious, but it was still a nice dream to have. What she didn't know though, were all the things Naruto had to do before he could achieve his dream, the main thing being, dealing with his past.
Back to the Occult Research Club room. Rias Grimori is currently looking out the window towards the cloudless sky. She is alone in the clubroom because the members of her peerage, except for Akeno, are all out fulfilling contracts. Akeno herself was trying to track down Naruto so that they could ask him more questions about the night at the abandoned church. Her thoughts were all revolving around a certain mysterious blonde devil when she saw a bright red light appear behind her. Turning around, she smiled to herself, recognizing the light as her brother's magic circle, and sure enough, when the bright light disappeared, there was Searsex standing before, although his usual happy smile was missing. In its place was a bitter frown. Oni-sama, what's wrong? She asked with concern, not liking the expression on his face. Sit down, Rias, we need to talk, he said calmly, only making her concern grow. Instead of his usual overly affectionate antics, and his pet name for her, Ria-tan, he was now acting completely serious. Following his orders silently, she sat down on one of the couches to which he sat opposite her. She felt extremely nervous about the whole situation. For her brother to be here and looking so serious, something had to be wrong. She wanted to ask him what was going on, but knew that he would tell her eventually, so instead of asking, she simply sat there in silence, waiting for him to begin. Searsex let out a sigh as he looked up at his sister and his features softened. As angry as he was at the situation, he just couldn't stay in a foul mood in Rias' presence. It's been a while, Rias. It's good to see you, he said genuinely with a slightly strained smile.
It's good to see you too, Oni-sama, Rias replied, still confused by his sudden appearance and by the serious aura he was giving off.
I wish that my visit could be on better terms, but, he began before trailing off and frowning.
What's going on? Rias asks, concern growing even more in her voice. In a few days' time, Graphia will be visiting to deliver some bad news, he told her cryptically. What kind of bad news? Rias asked nervously. Searsex let out another sigh before deciding to just get straight to the point. Your marriage to Riser is being brought forward. Open hearing those words, Rias' body went numb, her mind went blank, and her face adopted a look of utter betrayal. Seeing that expression on his little sister's face was like a dagger to Searsex's heart. And no, Rias whispered desperately, tears appearing in the corners of her eyes. They promised. They said I had until I finished schooling in the human world. Her voice started as a hurt whisper, but finished as a furious shout. I know, Searsex replied quietly, looking down from her betrayed expression. They can't do this to me. Rias shouted, you can't let them do this to me. Her voice reverted back to a whisper as the tears started flowing down her cheeks. Hearing those words just crushed Searsex even further. Seeing Rias in the state she was in, he got up and moved around the table, sitting down beside his sister and holding her in his arms, not in the playful siscon way that he usually does, but in the way of a protective older brother holding his hurt little sister. They sat in silence for a while. Searsex just sat there rubbing her back reassuringly while she cried into his hug. After a few minutes, Rias sat back and looked up at her big brother with sad eyes. Please don't let them do this to me. I don't want to be stuck with Riser for the rest of my life, she pleaded desperately. I won't let that happen, he told her, trying to force a comforting smile onto his face. There is no way I would leave you in the care of that family. What will we do? Rias asked while rubbing the tears from her cheeks. I don't know, but well, think of so knock. Their attention turned towards the door as the knocking sound interrupted Sirzek's words. Come in, Rias called out, while quickly drying her face. The door opened to reveal Aquino, who entered the room, closing the door behind her. She was about to speak when she realized that Rias wasn't alone. Lucifer-sama, she greeted politely with a respectful bow. Then her gaze went to her king and she adopted a concerned expression at seeing Rias with red eyes and a sad look on her face. Hello Aquino, Sirzek greeted with a smile, although it was a bit forced considering the reasoning behind his visit. What's going on, Rias? Aquino asked with concern in her voice. I'll tell you about it later, Rias replied dismissively, trying to regain her composure, before asking, have you found him yet? It took a while, but eventually I found him entering a meeting with Sona, Aquino answered. If I didn't know any better I would say that Naruto has been avoiding us, Rias said with a sigh. She was going to continue but her voice trailed off when she saw her brother's eyes widen. Did you just say, Naruto? Sirzek asked with a shaky voice. Rias and Aquino were both confused by Sirzek's reaction to hearing that name, but then Rias remembered Naruto telling her and Sona that he was an old friend of her brother's. Oni-sama, does the name Naruto Uzumaki mean anything to you? Rias asks, turning her attention towards Sirzek. Sirzek surprised the two younger devils by grabbing Rias' shoulders and looking straight into her eyes. Rias, where did you hear that name? Sirzek asked her seriously.
He came to Kuo earlier this week, Rias answered carefully, taken aback by Sirzek's change in attitude. She wasn't quite sure what to call it, maybe a mix between nervous and excited.
Before she could even question him on the sudden change in behavior, Sirzek stood up and disappeared with a bright red flash from his magic circle. Later that night, after Naruto's talk with Sona, he decided to visit the rest of his peerage to see how they were doing. He also wanted to find out when his queen was going to return to Kuo, but when he arrived, she was already gone. Seeing as he would see her later, he decided to just hang around for a bit and check up on things. He was happy with how his two new knights were settling in. They both seemed to be adjusting well to life as devils, and due to their circumstances before being reincarnated, they are both already quite powerful. When it got later into the night, Naruto decided that it was time to head back to Kuo. Using a magic circle, he teleported straight into the bedroom of his and his queen's apartment, and as soon as he arrived, he was on guard. He could sense a very strong devil close by, and although the presence felt oddly familiar, it still had him slightly on edge. Even though the unknown devil was suppressing their power, Naruto could still sense that it was way too high to belong to any of the devils from Kuo, which meant that the being in question had to come from somewhere else. Naruto slowly moved out of the room, keeping on his guard as he sneaked towards the lounge room. When he got to the corner just before the door, he could hear a female's voice. He instantly recognized it as the voice that belonged to his queen and realized that she was talking to the unknown devil. Claire-chan? He called out carefully as he entered the room, his eyes darting around to find the powerful yet slightly familiar presence that he was detecting. He saw the beautiful green-haired queen sitting in a chair facing his direction. She had a serious expression on her face, but it didn't look like the expression of someone who was in danger. In seeing her safe and seemingly relaxed, he let out a sigh of relief. Looking towards the couch closer to him, Naruto could see the back of a person's head. At first he thought it was Rias. The crimson red hair was the trademark color of the Gremory family, but he quickly realized that it wasn't long enough. Even if it was, he could sense way too much power coming from within this devil for it to be Rias. The red head sitting in front of him, facing Naruto's queen, saw her gaze move to behind him. He stood up and turned around, revealing a handsome young man with blue-green eyes and shoulder-length crimson hair. As soon as they locked eyes, Naruto realized who it was. His body froze and his eyes widened. Sirzek, Naruto said in shock with a small smile finding its way to his face. Sirzek was looking straight at him in just as much shock, and Naruto, he stuttered before. Sirzek bought his tensed fist back from Naruto's face for the second time. Surprisingly, it hurt quite a lot. From punching the blonde devil in front of him, he could already feel his knuckles bruising over as he shook the pain out of his hand. Naruto in the meantime was holding his nose in pain. The two straight jabs from Sirzek hurt like crazy, especially because he wasn't bothering to hold back any of his strength. If it wasn't for the phoenix blood running through Naruto's veins, his nose probably would have been ruined beyond repair. Thankfully though, the bruised and bleeding nose was already healing. I deserved that as well, Naruto said in an even tone as he looked back up at Searsex. That doesn't even begin to cover what you deserve, Naruto. Searsex growled with anger evident in his voice. I know, Naruto replied simply, causing Searsex to blink before frowning again. Nothing I ever do will be enough to make up for what I have done to you and Serafall. Naruto leant sideways against the doorway and ran his hand through his hair before continuing. All those years ago, I ran away because I wasn't strong enough to stay. I ran away because I was scared. I ran away because I didn't know what else to do, he said while releasing a sigh. I am not trying to make an excuse because I know that my actions are inexcusable, but after being gone for so long, I just didn't know how to return. We spent centuries worried about you, not knowing where you were or what you were doing. We didn't even know if you were still alive, Searsex said, leaning back against the edge of the couch. The anger from his voice was mostly gone now. It was replaced with relief and hurt. I am sorry, Naruto said sadly. I will never be able to forgive myself for not being there for you and Serafall. I didn't even know about the wars until they had passed, and even when I found out, I was still too much of a coward to return. Claire was still just sitting on the couch observing the reunion between her king and his childhood friend.
She had a slight frown on her face and was wishing there was something that she could do to help in the situation, but unfortunately there wasn't. She had sworn her loyalty to Naruto a long time ago, and would do anything that he asked of her, but this was simply something he had to deal with. He knew that certain people would be pissed at him when he returned, all of them for different reasons, and he knew that he would have to deal with the consequences when the time came.
Searsex was still leaning against the couch, looking at his long-lost childhood friend. So much has happened since the last time they saw each other. Searsex lived through multiple wars. He became one of the 4 leaders of the underworld, and he even got married and had a child. Throughout all of these events, he always wished that his best friend was there by his side. There was an awkward silence surrounding the 3 devils for quite some time. Claire was simply waiting for things to play out. Naruto was hanging his head in shame, feeling guilty for being such a bad friend, and Searsex was having an internal struggle between feeling overjoyed that he was finally with his best friend again, and feeling betrayed that said best friend has been completely off the grid for centuries without so much as a postcard. Naruto looked up when he heard Searsex release a slow sigh before their eyes locked again. I can't forgive you, Naruto, Searsex said slowly, making the blonde's eyes drop again. Naruto felt a wave of sadness overcome his body. He knew that returning and hoping for everything to go back to how it was never going to happen, but that didn't mean that it wasn't depressing either way. Not yet at least, Searsex continued, causing Naruto's gaze to snap back up with the smallest amount of hope in his expression. We are completely different people now. I don't know anything about you anymore, and you don't know the person that I've become. A slither of hope was burning inside Naruto while he listened to Searsex talk. He didn't dare interrupt in fear of the flame burning out, so he just continued to stand there and listen.
But nothing will be able to change the fact that you're my best friend, and nothing will be able to change the fact that you're my brother, Searsex finished with the smallest of smiles finding its way to his face.
The tension in the air was slowly subsiding and Naruto let out a small sigh of relief. It's good to see you again, Aniki, Naruto said with a small smile. The feeling's mutual, Naruto, Searsex replied with a matching grin.
The 2 devils stood forward and embraced each other in a hug. Naruto was overwhelmed with relief and joy that he had his best friend back. Even though Searsex said he hadn't forgiven him yet, it was still a start, and he promised himself that he would work hard to earn the Crimson Mao's forgiveness. When the 2 moved away from each other, Naruto motioned for Searsex to sit back down while he himself moved around to sit next to his queen. I guess introductions are in order, Naruto asked rhetorically. Searsex arrived at the apartment a little while before Naruto got there. In that time, he introduced himself to Claire as an old friend of Naruto's. Claire herself told him that she was a friend of Naruto's as well but didn't go into detail. She then invited him in to wait until Naruto's returned. Claire-chan, this is my best friend and unofficial brother, Searsex Lucifer, formerly Searsex Grimori, Naruto announced, causing the green-haired queen to bow her head slightly. It's a pleasure to meet you, Lucifer-sama. Naru-kun has told me a lot about you, she said respectfully. Searsex, this is my queen, Claire Uzumaki. As soon as the words came out of his mouth he saw Searsex's jaw drop. What, Uzumaki? Does that mean you two are ma? Searsex began to ask in shock before Claire cut in. No, we are not married, Claire replied, fighting back an amused giggle. When we first met, Claire was the only name that I had. When Naru-kun made me his queen, I took on the name Uzumaki for convenience, she explained. Oh. Well, that makes sense,
Searsex though out loud. Wait a minute. If she is your queen, then that means. Naruto winced at the realization occurring in front of him. You have already been back to the underworld, haven't you? Searsex demanded. Naruto nodded his head guiltily. When? There was now a powerful aura surrounding the Mao. I don't really think it matters now, does it? Naruto responded ambitiously with a sheepish smile on his face. When? Searsex repeated with a dry voice. 200 years ago, give or take a decade, he answered nervously. I. Punch once again. Searsex shook the pain out of his hand while Naruto clutched his nose, waiting for his healing factor to kick in. How many times are you going to do that? Naruto grumbled after his nose had finished healing.
Until I've punched you once for every year that you abandoned us, Searsex muttered under his voice, but was still heard by the others in the room.
Naruto let out a sigh, knowing that he deserved that and more, so accepting his fate he decided to move the conversation along. Before he could do that though, Searsex spoke up again. I need you to do something for me, he said in an enigmatic tone, gaining Naruto's full attention.
A lone figure was sitting near the top of a grassy hill overlooking a large lake. The surface of the water was peaceful and unmoving, their only light in the area came in the form of subtle reflections of the artificial moonlight from the water's surface.
The area was almost silent. The only noise that could be heard around the lake was a soft breeze and the low sound of breathing from the girl gazing down at the lake. The lone figure was a beautiful young-looking girl with back hair tied in twin tails. She looked to be rather young, although like most devils, her appearance was an inaccurate representation of her age, contrary to popular belief that the girl always wore her pink magical girl costume. She was now wearing a light blue shirt and black jeans.
She was sitting alone in the darkness, with the feeling of the cool breeze coming into contact with her small body. She was hugging her knees tightly to her chest and hiding her face. After a few minutes in this position, the black-haired girl looked up at the sky and revealed two violet-colored eyes. There was a sad look on her face, with a single tear streaking down her cheek. The girl was Serafall Leviathan. Serafall Leviathan, Satan Pink, one of the 4 leaders in the underworld and the most powerful female devil alive. She was respected for her unimaginable power, adored by the fans of her childish television show and loved by her family and friends. She was a happy and carefree individual who brought joy to those around her.
But, when she was alone, she let her mask drop. Only when nobody else was around would she let her true self emerge from within. Instead of the happy and carefree little girl that she was around other people, her true self would emerge. Her true self was bitter, pessimistic, lonely, broken. As another stray tear fell down her cheek, the temperature around her dropped harshly. The grass of the hill was instantly covered in a layer of frost and the lake below was slowly freezing solid. Serafall was clenching her fists and exhaling slowly to try and calm her mood. After a few minutes she managed to calm her emotions, and she just leant back to lay on the grass, staring up at the artificial moon. Serafall would often visit this area of the underworld, whenever she felt overwhelmed from maintaining the mask of her personality, and needed to just get away from everything. This is where she would go. There were various reasons that this place held so much importance to her, one of them being the isolation. Not many people know about the secluded area. The only person that even knew she still went there every now and then was Searsex. A few years ago, Serafall had an emotional breakdown so to speak, and went missing for over a week. Nobody could find her, and her family was becoming extremely worried. When they contacted Searsex about her being missing, he had a pretty good idea where she was. When he arrived at the lake, his hunch was proven correct when he found Serafall in the same spot that she was now. He had a feeling that she would be there because it was the first place that Searsex, Serafall and Naruto met, all those centuries ago. Serafall reached into her shirt and pulled out the necklace from around her neck. She looked up in the silver pendant, flipping it between her fingers. The pendant was a basic design, just a simple swirl, 2 inches in diameter, with a silver chain holding it in place. It was the first birthday present that she ever bought for him. Ever since he left, she made sure to buy a birthday present every year, in hopes of his return. Because she never had the chance to give the pendant to Naruto, she kept it with her, hoping that one day she actually could give it to him. She wore it every day, keeping it hidden under her clothes. It was such a bittersweet reminder to her. It was her way of never forgetting the first and only boy that she ever loved. 500 years have passed and she still had no idea if he's even coming back, let alone if he's still alive. She hated the fact that she never told him how she felt when she saw him every day. I guess you really don't know what you have until it's gone, she thought to herself bitterly. Don't get her wrong. Serafall loved her family and friends. Her sister meant the world to her and she would literally do anything for her. But there has always been a void inside her heart. Something has been missing for a long time. That something was her best friend, her first and only love, the stupid blonde prick that still hadn't come back yet, even though he promised her that he would. Serafall sat up and one final tear rolled down her cheek. When will you come back, Naruto? 3 days later. The atmosphere in the occult research club room was tense, more so than it had ever been before. Issei, Kiba and Asia noticed this as they entered the room to find Kaneko sitting in her usual spot, Rias sitting at her desk with Akino behind her and a silver-haired woman standing beside the desk. Issei recognized the woman from the previous evening when she had arrived at his house to interrupt a rather special occasion to Issei. Unfortunately for him, the silver-haired devil arrived just in time to prevent Rias from doing something that she would regret. While the newcomers settled into the room, they noticed the tension in the air and all looked towards their king to notice her unhappy expression. Oju-sama, now that everyone is here, may we begin? The silver-haired devil wearing a maid's attire asked politely. Before we start, I want to know why Oni-sama left so abruptly the other day, and didn't bother to come back, Rias replied, not bothering to hide the annoyance in her voice. I was not informed as to the reasoning behind Searzek-sama's actions. All he told me was to give you this letter and apologize for not returning. Grafia answered in a calm tone, handing Rias a small letter. Rias took the envelope with a raised eyebrow and looked at it suspiciously. The room was silent as she opened the envelope and unfolded the small letter. Upon reading the 2 words on the piece of parchment, Rias adopted a confused expression. She opened her mouth to question the strange message before being interrupted by the door opening once again. All eyes moved to the figure that entered the room with an unusually serious expression on his face. Naruto-kun. What are you doing here? Akino acts in place of her king, who seemed to be lost in thought as she fiddled with the letter from her brother. Naruto. Grafia thought in surprise, remembering back to the conversation between Searzek and Lord Gremory. Could this be the same person? I am here as a favor to an old friend. I hope I didn't miss anything important, the blonde said cryptically before moving to the side of the room and leaning against the windowsill. I am sorry, but this is a private matter. I must ask you to leave, Grafia said in her usual emotionless tone. No, it's fine, he can stay, Rias interrupted, sending the blonde a suspicious look while he just nodded in acceptance. Grafia seemed hesitant in accepting the unknown presence, but after a few moments moved on to her reasons for being there. Very well then, let us begin, she started before being interrupted once again. Her face remained stoic as always, but after being interrupted again she did let go a small sigh of annoyance.
The temperature in the room suddenly skyrocketed, causing everyone other than Naruto, Grafia and Rias to sweat a little bit. A large orange magic circle with the shape of a phoenix appeared in the middle of the room. The magic circle burst into flames, causing those closest to it to flinch away to avoid being burnt by the flames. When the flames finally died down, 2 figures emerged.
What a horrid smell. How devils can live in such a realm is beyond my understanding. The arrogant voice of a male spoke.
The voice belonged to a handsome young man who looked to be in his early 20s. He had short blonde hair with dark blue eyes. His outfit consisted of a burgundy blazer with gold embroidery over a white dress shirt, with the same burgundy-colored dress pants. The top few buttons of his shirt were left undone, revealing some of his bare chest.
Riser has arrived, the newly named Riser said with a mock bow towards Rias and her peerage. I've come all the way to see you, my beloved Rias. Who the hell is this? Issei acts indignantly. Riser seemingly ignored Issei's words while he continued to eye Rias with an almost predatory glance. This gentleman is Lord Phenex-sama, a pure-blooded devil of noble birth and second heir in line to the House of Phenex, Grafia explained, stepping forward from the desk which Rias was still behind. From his spot against the windowsill, Naruto had an emotionless expression on his face. He is also the fiancé to the next head of the House of Gremory, Grafia continued. What? Issei screamed out in shock before fainting.
A few minutes later, an embarrassed Rias was sitting on one of the couches with Akino at her side. After regaining consciousness, Issei moved next to Asia, while Kaneko and Kiba were leaning against the wall behind their king. Naruto was still leaning against the windowsill, unnoticed by the new occupants of the room. Riser moved to sit on the couch opposite Rias and Akino, and was followed by the other person who arrived with him. His companion was a beautiful young girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her long blonde hair was tied back into twin tails with large, drill-like curls held together by blue ribbons. She was wearing a long pink dress with white frills and a magenta bow at the front. She wore the dress and held herself with an air of proper nobility.
Ria's eyes were hidden behind her hair and she was taking deep breaths to keep herself calm. I have no intention of marrying you, Riser, ever, Rias said in a calm tone. But my darling, Riser started in a condescending tone, Riser believes that your family's circumstances are still such that you cannot afford to be so selfish. I will not bring my family to ruin, Rias snapped back immediately. You must remember Rias, it is imperative for devils like us to maintain pure bloodlines, he started arrogantly before being interrupted by the sound of someone scoffing. Riser's eyes snapped in Naruto's direction and his face adopted a furious expression. You dare interrupt me when I am talking? Who do you think you are, filth? He spat, earning a glare from Rias and her peerage. Naruto stood forward to introduce himself. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said simply, not bothering to show any respect to his supposed half-brother. Riser eyed Naruto with disgust, low-class trash. Your power is so low that I could easily mistake you for a pathetic human.
Naruto ignored the seething Riser. Instead his eyes were on the young girl sitting next to him. The girl noticed his eyes on her and couldn't help but stare back, thinking that she had seen him somewhere before, maybe in a book, or an old photo. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but he looked oddly familiar to her.
What's your name? Naruto asked towards the blonde girl. Lord Phenex, she answered proudly. It's a pleasure to meet you, Naruto replied with a polite bow. The other occupants of the room were slightly confused about Naruto's actions. Riser himself was getting even more annoyed at being ignored, and Ravel felt awkward at apparently gaining Naruto's attention.
Before this meeting continues, may I make a request? Naruto asked, turning towards Graphia who was simply observing the conversation in front of her. When she nodded, albeit suspiciously, to him, he spoke again, I would like to talk to Ravel for a few minutes, in private.
Everyone was confused even more after hearing his request. Graphia raised a curious eyebrow and turned to Ravel for her answer. A split second later, Naruto was pushed back into the wall with Riser's hand on his throat. His eyes were burning with rage. How dare you interrupt this important meeting when it has nothing to do with you, and on top of that you dare to request an audience with a member of the noble house of Phenex. Who the hell do you think you are? Riser snarled. I am the guy that will bury you alive if you don't remove your hand from me, now, Naruto growled in an icy tone that sent a shiver down everyone's spines. After a moment Riser regained his confidence and applied more pressure to his grip before scoffing. Idle threats from trash mean nothing to someone like he started arrogantly.
His voice hitched when he felt a burning pain on his arm. Looking down, he saw Naruto's hand gripping his wrist. The hand was encased in a black flame, and everyone could feel the tremendous heat that it was emitting. Riser actually started sweating from the heat and was shocked when he looked back up to see that one of Naruto's bright blue eyes had now turned into a blood-red color.
Rias and Akino recognized the black flames from the night at the abandoned church. Even though they could still feel the tremendous heat being emitted from the flame, it was nowhere near the same level as before, so they both assumed that he had some level of control over the heat. Interesting, they both thought curiously. After a mere 5 seconds the heat was too much for Riser to handle and he stood back clutching his arm. The sleeve of his blazer was completely disintegrated from the flame and there was a nasty burn mark on his arm that was healing way slower than it should have been. Did he just burn a phoenix? Rias, Akino, Ravel and Graphia thought in shock, although Graphia did a much better job of hiding the shocked expression on her face. The room was silent while Riser clutched his wrist and glared daggers at Naruto. Naruto for his part, turned his gaze back towards Ravel and raised his eyebrow questioningly. Oh okay, we can talk, Ravel said nervously. The two blonde devils left the crowded room and moved out into the hallway. Naruto closed the door and leant against the doorframe while Ravel stood there looking at him with some curiosity and nervousness. They stood in silence for a few moments, both simply observing each other until Naruto broke the silence. What's your opinion on the marriage contract between your brother and Rias? I think that it is necessary for the survival of devils, she answered in an elegant tone. Naruto simply nodded and took a few moments to think. His opinion on Riser had already been formed. From everything that had heard from Searzex about him, and from his own observations, he gathered that Riser was pretty much the same as their father. Do you believe in love, Ravel? Naruto asked the girl, catching her by surprise. I guess so, she replied confusedly, with a slight blush at the thought. What do you think it means to be in love? He continued. She took a moment to think about her answer before responding. Well, I think love means something different to everyone. To me, I think that love is acceptance and unconditional affection between two people that want to spend the rest of their lives together, she answered slowly but confidently. Naruto gave a small smile at her answer. Do you believe that love is important in marriage? He asked. Why yes, she answered slowly. Does Riser love Rias? He asked instantly. Ravel went to open her mouth to answer but slowly closed it again and looked down with a guilty expression. That was all the answer that Naruto needed. Even though she understood the importance of the marriage, she could still see that it was unfair on Rias. You tricked me. Ravel grumbled with a cute pout on her face which made Naruto chuckle. Sorry. I just wanted to get an honest opinion out of you, he apologized with a warm smile, surprising the girl. That's pretty much the same thing that my other brother asked me, the girl said with a suspicious expression on her face. For the first time that day, Naruto was genuinely caught off guard. Oh? Was all he managed to say while trying to regain his composure. Yep, my eldest brother, Ruvel, he visited me a few weeks ago and we talked a bit about the marriage contract. It wasn't the exact same wording, but the meaning behind his words was the same as yours, she continued. Ruvel doesn't live with the Phenex family anymore? Naruto asks in confusion. Ravel noticed his confused expression and it only made her more suspicious. No, he hasn't lived at home since before I was born, she said with a small frown. I don't know why, but he always seems distant around our parents. He's always been kind to me, but sometimes I hear him arguing with a Tucson. Ravel trailed off when she realized what she was saying and internally chastised herself for disclosing personal matters with a complete stranger. Naruto himself was lost in his own train of thought. Does he know what happened all those years ago, he wondered to himself. After another few minutes of silence, with both of them lost in thought, Naruto spoke again. May I ask you one more question? He waited for Ravel to give a small nod before continuing. How do you feel about Riser? Ravel paused and considered her answer for a few moments. As my big brother and king, I respect him due to his power and leading skills, she began before hesitating. But, Naruto prompted, but he's not like Ruvel, he can be cruel, sometimes, she admitted with some hesitation.
I see, Naruto said simply. Sometimes I wish I wasn't a part of his peerage, she added slowly, causing Naruto to look at her questioningly. Seeing the look, she decided to elaborate. He has a pretty good track record when it comes to rating games, but for the most part he just takes advantage of our regeneration. I am usually just ordered to stay by his side and observe, without taking part in the rating game itself.
Maybe he just wants to keep you safe? Naruto offered doubtfully. Ravel just shook her head before continuing. Our parents wanted me to become his bishop so that I could learn from him and make them proud. But his arrogance usually just results in me sitting around waiting for the game to end, she said with a sigh. I don't want to live in my brother's shadow. I want to prove my own worth, and show everyone that I am not just Riser Phoenix's little sister. I want to show everyone that I am a proud and capable Phoenix, just like Ruvel Ni, she finished with determination burning in her eyes. Naruto just smiled at Ravel's conviction. He couldn't help but admire the fact that she was raised by those people, yet still turned out to be a decent person like Ruvel. It would appear that where Riser took after their father, Ravel took after their eldest brother. With a satisfied nod and smile, Naruto turned back towards the door that they came from. Naruto re-entered the room with Ravel behind him. She had a thoughtful look on her face and wasn't paying much attention to the happenings in the room. She simply made her way back to her seat and sat back down. Naruto on the other hand watched as Riser was invading Ria's personal space. He was standing right in front of her with an arrogant look on his face while holding her chin up to make her look right into his eyes.
For the final time, Riser. I will not marry you. Rias almost shouted in an annoyed tone.
For the final time, Riser bears the reputation of the House of Phoenix. Besmirching our good name is unacceptable, he replied threateningly with fire in his eyes. Hey! Issei called out from where he was standing. Riser doesn't care if he has to incinerate everyone in this room. You will return to the underworld with me. Riser growled, not taking his eyes off Rias. Graphia was about to step in to calm things down, but was surprised when the blonde near the door spoke up.
That is no way to speak to the woman you intend on marrying now, is it? He asked in a mock tone, causing Riser to turn towards him with a glare. Besides, I think I know a way to settle this dispute fairly.
Oh? And what do you suggest, filth? Riser spat with venom in his voice.
A rating game, the blonde answered simply. You honestly expect this group of newly reincarnated trash to be any match for my peerage? Riser scoffed. Earning glared from Rias and her group.
Don't underestimate me, Rias growled in annoyance. My darling Rias, I meant no offense. I was simply referring to the gap in experience between us, Riser replied condescendingly.
Rias was about to respond but didn't get the chance when she heard Naruto speaking once again.
On behalf of Rias Gremory, I Naruto Uzumaki, challenge you Riser Phoenix, to a rating game to settle this matter, Naruto said in an even tone. The members of the room fell into silence, surprised by the sudden turn of events. Ria's hand unconsciously reached for the letter from Sirzex, fiddling with it slowly and thinking about the two words on the parchment.
Trust Naruto. Seeing the look on Ria's face, Riser adopted an arrogant smile and even began chuckling to himself.
Are you actually considering letting this low-class trash represent you, my darling? He asked with amusement. Your peerage would probably stand a better chance, he finished condescendingly. I accept Naruto-kun's offer, Ria said quietly, though everyone could hear her words, and everyone was surprised by her response. The smile on Riser's face grew and a predatory grin appeared. Also, I would like to add a condition to the stake. When I win, you have to release Revel from your peerage, Naruto stated confidently, earning curious glances from those in the room, especially Revel herself. Riser scoffed as if the possibility of losing wasn't even there, and when I win.
Naruto snapped his fingers and a new magic circle appeared behind him. When the light disappeared, two new people were added to the room. One of them was Naturo's beautiful green-haired queen. The other was a beautiful girl with knee-length pink hair and green eyes. She looked to be around the same age as Rias and had a soft expression on her face. The most notable thing about her though, was the cross-shaped pendant with a red gem in the middle hanging over her chest. Normally it wouldn't be that big of a deal, it could be passed off as an accessory, but to a devil who was negatively affected by holy artifacts, it should be impossible for her to be wearing it so casually. Most of the other devils in the room were eyeing her curiously, wondering how she was wearing the cross-shaped pendant. Riser and Issei, however, had lecherous expressions on their faces as they eyed the two new beautiful additions to the room with lust in their eyes. Allow me to introduce to you, my queen Claire Uzumaki, Naruto said, gesturing towards the green-haired women behind him. The other girls in the room raised an inquisitive eyebrow at the name, but nobody said anything, and my rook, Mocha Akashia, he finished, turning towards the pink-haired girl. Both of them gave a respectful bow towards the rest of the room before returning to their upright positions behind their king. As I was saying, when I win, you release Revel from your peerage, my wager will be the two lovely ladies behind me, Naruto said calmly.
I accept the terms, Riser replied instantly, licking his lips while eyeing the two girls behind Naruto. The other girls in the room adopted a disgusted look on their faces. Even Revel seemed to look a bit annoyed at her brother's behavior. Very well then. Seeing as I am the one issuing the challenge, I will leave you to determine the time and place, Naruto said with a small grin. The engagement party is scheduled for 1 week's time, we will hold the event then, as entertainment for the guests, Riser decided arrogantly. I accept. With everything decided, Riser stood up, with Revel following behind him. He sent one final vicious smirk towards Naruto and then disappeared into the flaming magic circle of the Phenex house. Not long after the two Phenex departed, Graphia took her leave to inform Sirzex and Lord Grimori on the sudden turn in events. Little did she know that Sirzex was practically behind everything that had happened. That left the members of the Occult Research Club alone with Naruto, Claire and Mocha. Although the tension in the air had mostly subsided, there was still a bit left lingering. Rias, are you sure about this? Akino asked her king in a hushed whisper, though it could be heard by all of those in the room. Rias herself stood up to address the members of her peerage. Onisama told me to trust Naruto-kun. I don't know what he's playing at, but if he thinks that somehow Naruto can succeed where we might fail, then I am sure about this, she stated somewhat cautiously, gazing in Naruto's direction. Before he could say anything, the pink-haired rook spoke up in his place. You needn't worry, Gremory-sama, if there was even the slightest chance of defeat, there is no way that Naru-kun would wager us on this event, she said, gesturing between her and Claire. Naruto simply nodded along with her words with a small smile on his face. The conviction in her words seemed to quell the nerves of Rias' peerage somewhat, but some of them still had questions. Why are you doing this? Rias asked curiously. You don't exactly gain anything by fighting on my behalf, do you? Naruto was silent for a few moments, considering his answer before he spoke. To be honest, I am doing this for multiple reasons. Firstly, as a favor to Sirzex. Rias raised an inquisitive eyebrow at this. Secondly, I am doing this because it's the right thing to do, but for the most part one have my own selfish reasons, he answered in a calm tone. How did you manage to burn a Phenex? This time it was Akino who asked the question. All eyes were on him, eagerly awaiting an answer. Amaterasu, he answered simply in a tone that told them that's all the answer that he would give. Anyo, how is Mocha-san able to wear that cross without being hurt? The timid voice of the blonde nun-turned-devil asked. Long story short, it's not a holy artifact, far from it actually, It's a magical object called a Rosario Cross. Omit-chan wears it to seal her true power. Naruto explained with a warm smile in the direction of his rook.
True power? Rias asked curiously. Naruto looked towards Mocha with questioning eyes. When she nodded her head in approval, he lifted his hand up and pulled down on the Rosario. With a quick clink the pendant came off and Mocha was surrounded in a dark red and black aura. The members of the orc covered their eyes and turned away from the potent energy. When it finally subsided, they turned back and were surprised to see that the pink-haired teenager was gone, to be replaced by a rather beautiful and matured silver-haired woman.
Naru-kun, the silver-haired female hummed in a sweet voice. Yes, Ura-chan. Naruto asked cautiously, knowing full well what was about to happen. When she just looked at him expectantly, he turned his head to the side, exposing his neck. Go ahead. The orc members were shocked when they saw Mocha sink her teeth into the flesh of Naruto's neck. When she pulled away, she licked a bit of stray blood of her lips and had a content expression with a slight blush on her face.
Rias was wide-eyed and speechless at what she had just seen.
How did he get a vampire to join his peerage? And she's not even a dhampir, but a pure-blooded vampire, she thought to herself in shock. The others were going through a similar train of thought, well all of them except Issei that is.
She's so hot, he yelled out indignantly, causing Rias to face palm, Naruto to chuckle and surprisingly both Kaneko and Mocha to mutter something under their breaths that sounded a lot like pervert. Naruto, how did you get a vampire to join your peerage? Rias asked slowly. Not only are they one of the most powerful yokai races, but I thought they were also extremely proud and elitist, she finished before turning towards the one she was referring to. No offense, she quickly added. None taken. Mocha responded. What you say is correct. Vampires are among the top yokai races and we are both feared and respected due to our power. We are also a proud race that respects power above all else. That is why I joined Naru-kun. Simply put, he is the strongest person that I've ever met, she explained with a warm smile in Naruto's direction. Also, his blood tastes delicious, she added with a grin causing Naruto to roll his eyes playfully.
Issei and Asia were both oblivious to what this meant, but Rias, Akino, Kiba and Kaneko were all surprised that a pure-blooded vampire was so fast to admit someone of a different race to be stronger than them. Just how powerful is he, they wondered simultaneously. We should take our leave now, we have preparations to make before the engagement party, Claire declared with a slight bow to Rias. Very well. Rias started before trailing off with a look towards Naruto. I don't know why it is that you're doing this, but I am extremely grateful, she finished with a smile and slight a blush on her cheeks. Don't mention it. Naruto dismissed with a smile. Please inform Sona that I will be absent from class for a while. Rias simply nodded and watched Naruto leave the room with his queen and rook following behind him. I hope this works out, Rias thought to herself with a small sigh. On the other side of the door Naruto was summoning the magical circle to take the three devils back to their pocket dimension to join the rest of the peerage. Naru-kun, you know that she won't be able to join us for the rating game, right? Claire said with a bit of sadness in her voice. I know, she's busy at the moment, and if she were to leave now, all the progress she's made will have been for nothing, he agreed with a frown. Mocha was left silent and patiently waiting. Just who is Naru-kun's other bishop, and where has she been all this time? She wondered to herself. She filed the thought away for a later time and stepped into the now completed magic circle. When the light disappeared, the three devils were nowhere to be seen. After leaving the occult research club room in the human realm, Riser returned back to his home, the Phoenix Manor. Upon entering the residence, the servants bowed to him respectfully as he simply walked past them, pretending they didn't even exist. He walked through the extravagant mansion without a care in the world. After a few minutes of walking through the large estate, he came to a fancy-looking study which belonged to Lord Phenex. When he reached his father's office, he opened the door and walked in, not bothering to knock. Riser. Lord Phenex looked up from his desk to see his son standing in front of him with a smirk. How did your business in the human realm go? Very well, the marriage is guaranteed, Riser stated with confidence. Oh. I expected some form of rebellion from your future wife, or has she finally come to accept her place in this world? Lord Phenex asked, somewhat distastefully. Don't get me wrong. There was rebellion. She still believes that she should have a choice, Riser answered with a growing smirk. She was adamant in denying the marriage contract, but now there shouldn't be any problems. What makes you so sure? Lord Phenex asked, raising an eyebrow inquisitively. Being the silly little girl that she is, she placed her fate on a rating game, Riser answered with a chuckle, and what makes things even better, is that she isn't even the one who will be fighting me, She let some low-class trash challenge me on her behalf. He finished before bursting into laughter. Lord Phenex grew a dark smile. It doesn't even matter who challenged you. No one can overcome the powerful might of a phoenix, he stated arrogantly.
My thoughts exactly. Riser agreed without hesitation, and when I win, I will get 2 more beautiful women to add to my possession, he finished in a lewd tone.
Lord Phenex seemingly ignored his son's final words, losing himself in thought. After this wedding takes place, Rias will be under our control, then I can finally get back at her trash-loving brother for trying to spread bad words about my family. Lord Phenex thought to himself with a dark smile growing over his face. Where is your sister? Lord Phenex asked towards Riser after returning from his thoughts. When we got back, she said that she was going to visit Ruval. Riser answered with little interest as he walked back towards the door. She said something about needing to ask him a question. With that, Riser left the room to go and find his peerage, while Lord Phenex poured himself another drink and went back to his paperwork. A week later, the 7 days after the meeting in the Orc room passed by extremely quickly for a certain crimson-haired heiress. During the week, Rias and her peerage went about their normal routine in Kuo. On the day of the engagement party, Rias and the others met in their clubroom to travel via magic circle to the Phoenix estate, where the engagement party was being held. When they arrived, the newer members of her peerage were amazed at the sheer size of the Phoenix estate, and when they arrived to the Phoenix's ballroom, they weren't disappointed to find that it was larger than an entire sports field.
Rias entered the large ballroom filled with devils wearing her long crimson ball gown. She was followed by Akino, wearing a similar gown, though slightly less modest, but in a raven black color, the same as her hair. Behind them was Kiba and Issei wearing white dress shirts with black suit jackets and pants. Lastly was Kaneko and Asia. Kaneko was wearing a simply golden yellow colored dress, matching her eyes, and Asia was wearing a similar green colored dress.
Rias led her group towards the quieter side of the ballroom, wanting to relax a bit before the main event started. To say that she was feeling anxious was an understatement. Her whole future was resting on the event, and her fate was practically in the hands of a stranger. The only thing that kept her hopeful was the fact that her older brothers seemed to have faith in Naruto for whatever reason. Her anxiousness didn't go unnoticed by the rest of the peerage either. For the most part, they were just trying to be supportive and do whatever they could for her, but at the end of the day, there wasn't really much they could do. Just like Rias, the rest of them were relying on Naruto to pull through for their king. Rias, are you okay? Your hands are shaking, Akino said with concern in her voice, sitting down next to her best friend. I am fine. Just a bit nervous, I guess, Rias answered, forcing a reassuring smile onto her face. Bucko, no matter what happens, we will still be by your side, Kiba told her with his usual friendly smile, although it was obvious that he was just as nervous as the others. No matter what, Kaneko added with her monotone voice, although there was a slight frown visible on her usually expressionless face. We won't let that arrogant bastard take you away from us. Issei added his piece passionately, making Asia nod her head in agreement. Rias smiled warmly at her peerage, and for the first time in over a week, it was a genuine smile. The group of young devils broke into light conversation to pass time until the party officially started. Every now and then Rias sent an anxious look towards the main doors, hoping to see Naruto arriving. Since leaving the Orc room, Rias hadn't seen Naruto all week. She assumed that he was with his peerage, getting them ready for the raiding game, but no matter how hard she and her peerage tried, they couldn't find him. Why isn't he here yet? She thought to herself, letting out a frustrated sigh. I hope he actually knows how to get here. Rias was suddenly interrupted from her thoughts when 2 new devils approached her and her group. Looking up, she smiled a bit at seeing her friend, rival. Sona, it's nice to see you, she said genuinely before turning to see the person standing next to her. Rias' eyes widened in surprise and she was actually speechless for a few moments. Standing next to the Cetri heiress was a handsome young man with black hair and violet eyes. He was quite tall and muscular, and looked a lot more mature than the last time that she saw him. Saraorg, she stammered out, still recovering from the shock, before jumping forward and wrapping her arms around her cousin. Where the hell have you been? Nobody has seen you in years. Yeah, sorry about that, he said with a chuckle, before returning the hug. Saraorg Bael is the eldest son of the Bael clan, making him Ria's cousin on her mother's side. Though he was the firstborn son of the Bael clan, he wasn't given the title of heir because he didn't inherit the trademark power of destruction that is so prominent within the family. While growing up, he was treated poorly by his father, seen as a disappointment for not inheriting their family's famous trait. From a young age, Saraorg was shunned from his family, along with his mother, and they were banished to the countryside on the outskirts of Bael territory.
Even though he wasn't acknowledged by the Bale clan, that didn't stop him from being close with his cousins, Sirzex and Rias. From a young age Saraorg got along well with Sirzex, seeing him as a role model and older brother figure. He also got along well with Rias, even though he was only a few years older than her. He took it upon himself to try and be a role model of sorts to her, just like Sirzex was to him.
Some people might think he'd resent the crimson-haired siblings for inheriting the power that he did not, but that couldn't have been further from the truth. He valued them both highly and cherished the bonds they forged. However, a few years ago Saraorg stopped visiting them. At first Rias was sad, thinking that had started to resent her and her brother. Then after months of hearing nothing from her cousin, she decided to go and visit his mother to find out where he was. When she spoke with Miss Labiel, Saraorg's mother, she told him that he had gone on a training trip to become stronger, so that he could challenge his younger half-brother for his birthright to be heir.
Rias accepted it at the time, happy that he wasn't actually resentful towards her like she'd feared, but as the months went by, and he still hadn't returned, she started worrying that something had happened to him. Months continued to go by, turning into years, and he still didn't return. She went to visit Misla again to find out if she knew where he was. When she asked, she was disappointed to find out that even though he had been sending her occasional letters, she had no idea where he was.
She had even tried to get Sirzex to look for him, but when he tried, he too couldn't find a trace of him. It was as if he had completely disappeared. Yet here he was, randomly showing up at her engagement party after 3 long years. "Where have you been all this time?" she asks, slightly annoyed, after letting him go from the hug. "Here and there," he answered vaguely with a smile. "For the most part I've just been training to become as strong as possible." "You've been gone for years though. Was it really necessary to just go missing like that?" Rias asked him with a frown crossing her face. "Oh, well, I guess I got lost on the path of life," he responded sheepishly.
The rest of the young devils observing the conversation had to hold back laughter while Serserg smiled at the twitching Rias.
That she began in an annoyed tone before being interrupted by a presence on the main stage in the ballroom. She sighed at seeing who it was and completely forgot about the scolding she was about to send in Saraorg's direction.
"Greetings, renowned devils of the underworld. Riser would like to thank each and every one of you for coming today." Riser spoke from the main stage in the ballroom. Moments prior to the beginning of his speech, he appeared in the usual Phenex magic seal in a burst of flames. Riser was revealed to be wearing a white suit with a red shirt, unbuttoned down to below his chest.
Beside him appeared Ravel, wearing an elegant pink dress, and on the other side was Lord Phenex in a similar white suit, and Lady Phenex, wearing an identical pink dress to Ravel's. This is a historic moment for the world of devils, and I want our dear guests to be the first to know that 2 great dynasties are about to become one, he announced to the guests while his eyes were traveling up and down. Rias, riser of the distinguished house of Phenex, shall wed Lady Rias of the illustrious house of Gremory.
Riser smirked when the crowd began cheering at the news. Lord and Lady Phenex were clapping along with the crowd, though Lord Phenex was sending a subtle glare in the direction of where Sirzex was standing with Lord and Lady Gremory. Ravel, on the other hand, wasn't clapping with the crowd, but instead searching through it to see if she could spot Ruvel.
When the cheering died down, Riser motioned to begin speaking again, but was interrupted by a guard flying through the main doors and collapsing to the ground. "What is the meaning of this?" Lord Phenex shouted from the stage while the devils around the doors moved to create somewhat of an opening. From their spots near the side of the room, Rias and her peerage, along with Sona, turned curiously to see what the cause of the commotion was. "Where did Saraorg go this time?" Rias asked towards Sona with a hint of annoyance in her voice after noticing that he was no longer with them. "I don't know, he was here a second ago," Sona answered before trailing off when they could all see the cause of the commotion. "What the?"
6 figures were walking through the main doors to the Phenex ballroom, all wearing black cloaks with hoods pulled over their heads. The 6 figures completely ignored the confused looks they were getting from the devils surrounding them, and walked straight past them and all of the guards. When the moment of surprise wore off, Lord Phenex glared towards the intruders and spoke angrily in their direction. "Who dares interrupt this special occasion?" The 6 cloaked figures reached the stage, ignoring Lord Phenex's question, and were now standing directly opposite the Phenex family in front of the entire crowd. "We were invited, as tonight's entertainment," the apparent leader of the group stated calmly from under the cloak. "Oh? You must be the low-class fool who thought it wise to challenge a member of the Phenex family," Lord Phenex acts arrogantly. At hearing this, hushed whispers started to travel across the ballroom. None of the devils knew anything about any supposed entertainment. or a challenge being made towards the Phenex family. An excited atmosphere quickly washed over the crowd as they watched the stage for further developments.
A crimson flash of light drew everyone's attention to the center of the stage, where Seer's ex Lucifer now stood.
Fellow devils, we are all honored to be attending such a prestigious event. Seer's ex announced, trying to force the sarcasm to stay out of his voice, which seemingly worked if the cheers of the crowd were anything to go by. This event is being held to celebrate the engagement between Riser of House Phenex and my lovely little sister, Rias of House Grimoire. He continued, earning more cheers.
Rias herself blushed slightly at having the attention focused back towards her momentarily.
Seeing as this is such a momentous occasion, he was trying so hard not to let the cynical sarcasm seep into his voice. By this point, there has been some entertainment organized for this evening.
So you were behind this, you trash-loving brat, Lord Phenex thought to himself venomously.
Tonight's entertainment shall be a rating game between Riser Phenex and the challenging party, Seer's ex continued while gesturing towards the 6 cloaked individuals. There are multiple things being staked on the outcome of this rating game by both parties, but the main reward going to the victor will be the marriage contract involving the Grimoire heiress.
This earned mixed reactions from the room filled with devils, but the one thing they all had in common was the curiosity in their eyes while looking towards the 6 cloaked figures. With all of that being said, I think it's due time that we meet our challengers for this evening, don't you? Seer's ex axed towards the crowd, earning another excited cheer.
Seer's ex, along with every other pair of eyes in the room, then expectantly turned towards the group of 6 cloaked figures, waiting for the grand reveal that would eventually shock the entirety of devil kind.
Elsewhere at the same time, Serafall Leviathan was sitting behind a large desk piled with paperwork. She hated dealing with paperwork so often, but in her position as head of foreign affairs it was necessary. She let go a sigh of frustration before standing up from her chair and heading away from the study towards her room. Earlier in the week, Seer's ex visited her to see how everything was going. That in itself wasn't all that weird, seeing as the two were best friends and everything. The thing that was weird, however, was Seer's ex's mood. Serafall would have assumed that Seer's ex would have been angry about the upcoming engagement party between his sister and that Phenex, but contrary to her expectations, Seer's ex was laid back and relaxed, excited even. She was even more suspicious when he ended up practically begging her to attend the party. Originally she wanted nothing to do with the event, and while she was quite fond of Rias, and the prospect of seeing her own little sister, she couldn't get over the fact that she'd be in the presence of those people. She hated the Phenex family with a passion and wished there was something that she could do about the engagement, if only to spite the Phenex family, but there simply wasn't anything she could do, just like Seer's ex. That's why she wasn't going to go to the engagement party. Not only did she despise the family and want nothing to do with them, but she felt like attending would the same as showing her support towards the marriage, something that she wholeheartedly did not support. In her eyes, Riser was the exact same person as Lord Phenex. They were both arrogant, elitist and condescending. She was surprised to find Seer's ex begging her to attend the engagement when she told him she wasn't planning to go. She was still hesitant about going, and was sure that Seer's ex wasn't telling her something, but she was eventually convinced to attend. That didn't mean she wasn't going to show up fashionably late to avoid as much of the event as possible. Back in the Phenex family's ballroom, the 6 cloaked figures were lowering the hoods of their cloaks, revealing their faces to the ballroom filled with devils. To say that there was quite some shock from various different people for various different reasons would be an understatement. At the front of the group stood Naruto, in his adult form. He stood at a proud 6 feet tall with his tan skin and bright blue eyes. His spiky blonde hair stuck out in all directions with 2 jaw-length bangs framing either side of his face. Standing next to him was Claire, coming in at just a few inches shorter than her king. She stood proudly with her waist-length green hair. Behind the king and queen were 2 more figures. One of them looked to be around the age of 18 with long purple-pink hair flowing down to her waist. Next to her stood another girl looking to be around the same age. This girl, however, had knee-length black hair and red eyes. Rounding out the group was the tall, silver-haired vampire, Mocha, beside a handsome man with black hair and violet eyes, Sirarog Bael. A lot of devils in the ballroom recognized Saraorg even though it had been multiple years since any of them had seen him, and all of those that saw the young devil were shocked to discover that he was a part of this unknown blonde devil's peerage. Even though he was treated harshly by his family, it was still uncommon for a high-class devil to submit themselves to the authority of another devil. None were more surprised though than Rias herself. Sitting near Rias though, Heba was curiously eyeing the girl with black hair and red eyes, or more specifically, the sword that was strapped to her waist. Even though the blade was sheathed, he could sense a strange, demonic-like power radiating from it.
It was subtle, so he wouldn't be surprised if not many people picked up on it, but he could feel immense power coming from the sword, even from the distance he was at.
Sitting beside Kiba, Issei was simply drooling at the sights of the four new beauties on the stage. Who are you, to think that you have the right to challenge the might of a phoenix? Lord Phenex asked towards the blonde leading the group, seemingly oblivious to who it actually was.
Naruto chuckled darkly inside his mind at this. My name, he paused giving a mock bow towards Lord Phenex, is Naruto Uzumaki.
This revelation caused differing responses throughout the room. From the table where Lord and Lady Gremory were seated, could be heard the sound of a glass being dropped out of pure shock. Both were wide eyes and completely speechless. Serafall from his position between the two groups on the stage had a small smirk on his face while trying to remain indifferent. Riser was just eyeing the girls that he would be adding to his collection in a lewd manner, completely ignoring the blonde that had both of his parents' full attention. Lady Phenex was seething and glaring daggers in Naruto's direction, and if looks could kill, Riser might actually have had a chance if his mother could help him. As for Lord Phenex, his eyes were wide with surprise for a few moments, before recovering and adopting a dark look over his face. So this mistake is still alive and kicking. Coming here today was a mistake. Trash. You don't stand a chance against a pure-blooded phoenix, he thought to himself arrogantly. Ravel on the other hand, wasn't even looking towards Naruto and his peerage, instead she was staring at her parents, observing their reactions to the blonde devil's identity.
So what Ruvel told me was true. I can't believe it, she thought in shock, the reactions she witnessed from her parents, confirming what her eldest brother had told her.
The outcome of this challenge has already been determined, Lord Phenex stated confidently, placing his hand on Riser's shoulder. Indeed it has, Naruto replied calmly, shall we begin? The two groups of devils were soon teleported into the arena where the raiding game would be taking place. Naruto looked around to observe the arena that the battle would be taking place in. They were in a large coliseum-like construction made out of stone. The ground was made into a large black and white checker pattern similar to that of a chessboard, and all around the outside of the arena were large, multiple-story tall chess pieces. Fitting place for a raiding game, he thought to himself with some amusement. Attention one and all, my name is Graphia Lucifuge and I will be the mediator of this raiding game. Came the voice belonging to Graphia from seemingly everywhere around the devils inside the arena. The terms have been set by both sides and both teams are now inside the arena. For your pawns to promote, they simply have to reach their enemy's side of the board. When any pieces are unable to continue, they will be removed from the game to receive appropriate medical attention, and the game will not end until one of the kings either surrenders or are unable to continue. There was a brief pause as everyone took in the information before Graphia continued. The raiding game has now begun. Phoenix Ballroom, this is going to be so fun to watch, thought Serafall with an amused grin. I hope this all works out, Rias thought nervously. That trash doesn't stand a chance against a true phoenix, were the venomous thoughts coming from both Lord and Lady Phenex simultaneously. Heaven, an extremely beautiful woman with curly blonde hair and a voluptuous figure, was excited awaiting the beginning of the raiding game about to take place. There were 6 sets of white wings extended from her back and a halo floating above her head. Michael, it's about to start, she called out towards a handsome man with pale skin, long blonde hair and green eyes. He also had 6 pairs of wings, though his were gold in color, coming from his back and a similar halo floating over his head. The Archangel simply smiled towards his sister before joining her in her observations. I can't wait to see how much Jibril-chan has grown since leaving with Naruto, she exclaimed with excitement clear in her voice. Grigori headquarters, a tall man appearing in his 20s with an average build, black hair with golden bangs at the front and a black goatee, was leaning back in his chair with his feet propped up on the table. Just like the angels from heaven, Azazel was excitedly awaiting the raiding game, though he didn't show it in the same manner as those airheads from above the clouds. Behind the leader of the fallen angels stood a young man with dark silver hair who had bored expression covering his face. Why are we wasting out time watching this squabble between devils? The young silver-haired man asked nonchalantly. Because I have a feeling that the blonde, he said pointing towards where Naruto was standing on the screen in front of them, will provide quite the interesting performance. That, and I want to see if the rumors about his sacred gear are accurate, Azazel thought to himself afterwards. He looks like another ordinary devil to me. I think that there's a bit more to him than that. You might find that you have more in common with him than you realize. Valley, Azazel added cryptically with a chuckle. Unknown location. Kick some yakitori ass, NYA. Raiding game arena. Okay guys, this is it, Naruto said, gaining the attention of his peerage. When they all turned to him with their full attention, he smiled and continued.
Claire, I want you to stay by my side as we observe the coming fights, he said towards his queen, who simply nodded.
He then turned his head towards his pink purple-haired bishop and his knight with knee-length black hair and red eyes.
Jibril, Akame, I want you two to stick together and provide each other with support, aim to take out their knights and bishop. I am guessing that Riser would keep his queen and sister by his sides during the early stages of the raiding game, he told them while they just nodded along attentively.
Finally he turned towards his rook and pawn. You two stick together as well. Work together to take out the rooks and pawns. The both smiled and nodded along with his words. Exited for the chance to kick some ass. Siraorg, show the people watching this just how big a mistake the Bael clan made by neglecting you simply for not inheriting the power of destruction, he added for some extra motivation. Oh, I plan to. Siraorg added with a determined grin. Do you still approve of my request? He asks. Naruto looked over towards the Phoenix peerage in the distance before a smile came across his face. If you think you can handle all 8 of his pawns promoting, then I won't stop you, he answered, knowing that his pawn was more than capable handling the 8 promoted pawns.
Saraorg and Mocha were both patiently waiting on their side of the board. As soon as the Phoenix peerage started moving, they noticed around half of the members trying to subtly make their way around the side of the board, behind the large chess pieces, assuming that it was the pawns trying to sneak around in order to promote. The Uzumaki pawn and rook simply took to waiting for them to arrive. After a while, Mocha heard, with her heightened senses, 10 sets of footsteps approaching them quietly. Well, at least they were trying to be quiet.
Before they knew it, Mocha and Siraorg were completely surrounded by the 10 devil group who had victorious smirks on their faces. Ha! You two must be as idiotic as your king, a well-endowed girl with shoulder-length black hair commented condescendingly.
Oh, and why is that? Mocha asked in a calm tone. Well, your king is an idiot for thinking he could stand a chance against Riser-sama, the same girl continued before one of her comrades took over. And you two are just as foolish for letting yourselves be trapped by us, a girl with brown hair and a mask covering half of her face continued.
Trapped, you say? Siraorg acts in an amused tone. Just because there are more of you, and you're surrounding us, that doesn't mean that we are in any way trapped. The 10 girls surrounding the 2 members of Naruto's peerage smirked before 8 of them called out.
Promotion night. Called out 2 identical-looking girls with green hair carrying chainsaws and a girl with blue hair who was carrying a staff. Promotion rook. Came the shouts of the remaining 5 pawns, who either didn't think it necessarily to promote to the queen rank, or their bodies simply couldn't handle the strain. This is starting to get boring, Naruto's silver-haired rook commented in a bored tone, earning a chuckle from her companion and glares from the enemy.
You're going down. There's no way a simple rook and a single pawn who hasn't even promoted can take on all of us, shouted 2 of the girls wearing cat ears that promoted to the rook status. The 10 Phoenix devils were about to charge towards Mocha and Siraorg before pausing with a bit of hesitation when they saw Siraorg was laughing. Why are you laughing? Shouted a girl with brown hair wearing a maid's dress. Siraorg ignored the question before turning to Mocha with a grin. Do you want to have some fun with them, or just end it quickly? The sooner we put them in their place and end this excuse for a raiding game, the sooner I can get something to eat, the vampire, devil responded with a grin. Ladies first, Siraorg commented gesturing towards the furious-looking devils surrounding them, though it would be nice if you left the pawns for me, he added. Without another words, Mocha vanished in a blur of speed that none of the Phoenix pieces could follow. I thought she was a rook. How can she be this? Exclaimed the half-masked rook from Riser's peerage before she was silenced. One of Riser-sama's rooks has retired. What? She took down Isabella with one hit. Screamed the black-haired rook, now feeling slightly panicked. The information they'd been told was that the one with silver hair was a rook, and although her strength made sense, the sheer amount of speed she just displayed should have been impossible. How is that even possible? She began before. Another one of Riser-sama's rooks has retired, with both enemy rooks now removed from the game. Mocha returned to the spot that she was previously, with a bored look on her face. Your turn, she commented with some amusement at seeing the mix between awe and terror come across the 8 pawns surrounding them. You can't beat all of us. The pawns shouted in unison before charging. Siraorg looked around him with a bored expression before disappearing in a burst of speed similar to Mocha's. A split second later he returned to his spot and grinned towards Mocha. E8 of Riser-sama's pawns have retired, Grafia announced, internally scolding herself for letting her surprise show through the announcement. Show off. Mocha teased as they started walking towards the rest of the Uzumaki peerage. No, the family. The ballroom inside the Phoenix Manor was dead silent. Not a single person could believe what they just witnessed.
10 of Riser's pieces were taken out in mere seconds, after they were allowed to promote, and the Uzumaki pieces did so with seemingly zero effort.
They were going so fast, I couldn't even follow their speed, Kiba thought out loud in shock at what had just witnessed.
Sitting near her blonde knight, Rias couldn't help but smile a little with hope building within her. Shouldn't we go and help the others before we lose even more pieces? A woman with wavy purple hair asked anxiously towards her king.
Nonsense, Ubaluna. They may have been able to deal with the others, but it doesn't matter. They are simply reincarnated devils who have little power in comparison to a glorious phoenix, Riser responded arrogantly. Standing beside her brother, Ravel couldn't help but frown at his attitude. Elsewhere in the arena, Jibril and Akame were standing across from both of Riser's knights, and one of his bishops.
Both groups were observing each other silently before one of Riser's knights stepped forward. She was a young woman with light brown hair, wearing a set of silver armor. Fellow Knight San, I challenge you to single combat, the exclaimed confidently, but at the same time respectfully.
Akame tilted her head curiously to look at the knight challenging her. She was about to accept the challenge when the other knight spoke up. Carlamine, this is no time for your chivalry to come into play. We've already lost half of our pieces. We should both take on the knight, while Mahai takes on the bishop, stated the tall young woman with long dark blue hair tied into 5 ponytails. But I agree with Cyrus. I know that you like to uphold your honor as a knight and everything, but we can't risk losing anyone else, Mahai interrupted before Carlamine could protest. Fine, Carlamine conceded, drawing her sword and channeling energy into it, making it become surrounded by flames. Back on the other side, Akame turned towards Jibril. I'll take the knights, you take the bishop, she said calmly while drawing her own sword. Okay. Jibril replied cheerfully before extending her wings. When she did so, all those who were watching widened their eyes in shock.
On Jibril's back were not the normal bat-like devil wings that you'd usually see, instead there was 3 sets of white angel wings. While all the people observing were trying to figure out how it was possible for Naruto to have an angel in his peerage, Ajuka was grinning at learning something new about the system he created. It turns out that the prototype sets have even more hidden qualities than he could have imagined.
After somewhat recovering from their shock, Riser's 3 pieces engaged the Uzumaki pieces.
Carlamine dashed in to swipe her flaming sword low in an attempt to cleave Akame's waist. At the same time Cyrus jumped higher, aiming her broadsword at Akame's neck. Just before the hits could connect, Akame flicked her sword up, knocking Cyrus off course, causing her to fall past her, before dropping to one knee and blocking Carlamine's strike.
Carlamine jumped back, surprised at the precision and strength behind the girl's movements. Cyrus was now behind Akame, so Akame was kneeling between the 2 Phoenix Knights.
Without bothering to wait for another attack, Akame flipped backwards, catching Cyrus by surprise when she landed behind the blue-haired knight. A split second later she dashed forwards with an overhead strike. The blow was parried by Cyrus' broadsword, but she was still forced to stumble backwards from the sheer strength behind the blow. Seizing the opportunity, Akame lashed out again with a series of fast-paced sideways and overhead swipes. Cyrus was barely able to defend herself from the onslaught, and sighed in relief when Carlamine appeared beside her, helping her parry the incoming blows. The 2 managed to do a decent job of defending themselves, but they were being pushed back at a decent rate. Both girls were forced to cross their blades in order to block a powerful overhead swipe coming from Akame. As soon as the 3 swords connected, Akame pushed forward into their guard, making them lose their balance. After a few fast-paced swipes towards the unbalanced Phoenix pieces, Akame jumped back and started walking away. Cyrus, are you okay? Carlamine asked nervously, while helping her comrade back to her feet. Yeah. I just got a few cuts on my arm, she answered dismissively. You? Same, just 2 shallow cuts on my A. She began to respond before both girls screamed out in pain and collapsed to the ground with strange black symbols crawling across their skin from where the cuts were inflicted. Both of Riser-sama's knights have retired. What just happened? Mahai asked in shock from her spot in the air across from Jibril. Akame has a special blade, Jibril answered in a calm voice. When cut by her blade, the injured party is injected with a powerful poison that can apparently stop a human's heartbeat in mere seconds. Luckily for those 2, it only seems to severely injure devils, so given enough time to recover, your friends should be fine. Milhei just took in the information, shocked that she could have such a powerful weapon. Is it a sacred gear? She wondered to herself before shaking the thought from her mind and focusing on the pink purple-haired angel, devil floating across from her. You're going down.
Milhei shouted before raising her hands above her head and conjuring a large ball of fire. Once the ball of flames was around a meter in diameter, she hurled it in Jibril's direction before starting to conjure several more fireballs.
Jibril simply dodged the incoming attack by swerving through the air, using her wings to propel her at great speeds to dodge all of the attacks. After a while of dodging, the Phenex bishop seemed to understand that her attacks were never going to hit, so she stopped and glared in Jibril's direction.
"Stay still, damn it," she cursed. "If you insist," Jibril responded with a smile, confusing the girl floating across from her. Seconds later Jibril's wings rose up behind her, and with a powerful flap, the 3 sets of wings came down. However, instead of moving the angel-devil hybrid, she stayed perfectly still while over 30 spears of light shot out of where her wings came down. Milhei adopted a terrified look on her face as she willed her body to move, but before she could blink, it was too late. One of Riser Sama's bishops has retired, yay! Ji-chan has gotten so much stronger. Gabriel cheered from where she was watching the rating game in heaven. She has indeed, Michael agreed. It's amazing that after only this long with Naruto, Jibril has grown to not only 2, but 3 sets of wings, he admitted, slightly in awe.
Well, we both knew that she would achieve greatness, Gabriel stated with affection obvious in her voice, and after everything Naruto did for us, it seems that allowing Jibril to join him has not only helped Naruto, but it has also helped her greatly.
Michael smiled and nodded in agreement, but on the inside he was holding back a frown. I just hope that he doesn't lose himself, going down the path that he is. Riser was gritting his teeth in frustration. Somehow, that trash and his peerage managed to take down all of his pawns, both rooks and knights and one of his bishops. It simply was not acceptable. They all fell without taking a single piece with them, Riser growled, verbalizing his frustrations. After I deal with this mess, they will all be punished for their incompetence, he spat out, finally losing the last of his composure after watching his peerage get destroyed. He wasn't annoyed that they fell. The thing that annoyed him was the way that they were defeated. All of the members of his peerage that had been defeated so far were taken out with little effort from the enemy. On top of that, they didn't manage to take out a single piece of that trash's group.
That was simply not acceptable. He was being humiliated. On his pride as a Phenex, he would not accept it. Ubeluna looked towards her king with concerned eyes. Meanwhile Ravel just rolled her eyes and sighed. For the most part she was used to her brother's attitude, but lately she found it bothering her more and more. Ever since meeting Naruto and then later talking to Ruvel, she found her respect for Riser steadily decreasing, and his current behavior was certainly not helping. The trio looked up when they noticed Naruto and his peerage walking straight towards him. Unlike them, Naruto still had his entire peerage with him, and they looked perfectly fine.
If you surrender now, I won't be forced to humiliate you further, Naruto stated calmly, causing Riser to glare at him.
There is still no way trash like you can defeat me, Riser growled, causing Ravel to sigh. Even though you managed to defeat the members of my peerage, it means nothing. They are nothing compared to me. Ravel sighed again. I am an almighty Phenex. I am immortal. You cannot defeat me. He screamed in rage, causing Ravel to sigh again.
Well, I gave you a chance. Don't say I didn't warn you, Naruto told him before turning back to his group. You guys have done your job. Leave the rest to Claire and myself. Cyraorg, Mocha, Akame and Jibril all nodded before moving away to watch the rest of the rating game from a distance. Do you think it wise to send away the rest of your pieces? Ubeluna asks, surprised that Naruto would seemingly throw away his advantage.
It doesn't matter. Each member of my peerage could single-handedly take on your entire group, Naruto answered. What caught Ubeluna by surprise was the fact that he didn't even sound as arrogant as the statement might suggest. The look in his eyes told him that he believed what he was saying, and if everything that has happened so far was anything to go off, it was probably true. Riser on the other hand scoffed at the prospect, not believing it to be true. Ubeluna, deal with them, Riser told her. When he saw her hesitation his eyes narrowed and he added, now. I'll leave this one to you, Naruto said to his queen with a smile. Claire nodded her head and stepped forward, facing the nervous-looking Ubeluna. If you surrender now, Queen San, neither I or my king will think any less of you, Claire told her in a calm voice. Even though it was meant as a gesture of goodwill, the pressure coming from her king and her will to win for him made Ubeluna take the words as an insult. In doing so she flew into the air and looked down towards Claire, who simply looked back up at her. In the name of Riser Phenex-sama, I will take you down, she shouted with determination. She raised her hands and moved them in Claire's direction. As soon as she did this, there was a large explosion on the ground surrounding where Claire was standing. I suppose that's why they call her the Bomb Queen, Naruto thought from his viewpoint.
Ha! It appears you're not as strong as the rest of your group, Eubeluna stated while the dust was settling around the area that Claire had just been caught in the explosion. It appeared to hit her, but there was no announcement, so she must have survived it somehow, she realized in annoyance. It will take a lot more than you're capable of to defeat me, Claire's voice came from behind her. Eubeluna spun around in surprise. When she turned, she saw Claire facing her, without a scratch on her body. How? She started to axe, but a split second later Claire reached towards Eubeluna and the fight was over. As soon as their skin came into contact, Eubeluna seemed to slip from consciousness, her body started to writhe around in pain, and tears even began falling from her tightly closed eyelids. Surrender, and it'll make it stop, Claire stated in a calm voice. In the meantime, Eubeluna was trapped inside a hallucination.
Claire was using an ability that allowed her to trap Eubeluna inside her mind, forcing her to experience the hallucination that was contorting the memories of her past into a nightmare.
Surrender, she repeated, not really wanting to force the girl to suffer more than necessary. No matter what Eubeluna did, she could not escape the hallucination. It was at that moment, when she was biting back her screams of pain and sorrow, that she realized something. She realized that they never stood a chance. Riser Sama's queen has retired. After Eubeluna's body disappeared, leaving only Riser and Ravel, Claire dropped to the ground and moved to stand beside her king once more. Naruto gave her a simple nod before they once again stepped forward to confront the Phenex siblings.
Naruto noticed the look of absolute rage in Riser's eyes, and when he turned towards Ravel, he was surprised to see her watching him, not with rage or anger like their brother, she was watching him with curiosity in her eyes. Filing the thought away for a later time, Naruto turned back towards the seething Riser. What now, Riser? You have no more pieces to hide behind, so what will you do? He asked. Will you admit that you never had a chance and surrender, saving yourself further humiliation? Will you force your little sister into a battle that you know she cannot win? Or will you fight me yourself, and settle this raiding game once and for all? You dare talk down to me? Like I'm some common trash like you? Riser growled. I am a Phenex. He screamed before flaring his energy and summoning his large fiery wings. I will kill you for daring to talk down to me.
Naruto just let out a tired sigh, like father like son. Stop. Everyone's attention turned towards the blonde-haired girl with drill-like curls. Just stop, you can't win, he's proven that he is superior to you, why can't you just accept it and move on? Ravel asks, surprising all of those watching. What did you just say to me? Riser growled in a dangerously low voice. I said that you should surrender, Ravel repeated, not wanting to stand down. You, Riser was now shaking from his rage, completely forgetting Naruto and turning his full attention towards Ravel. You are a disgrace to this family, he screamed at her. No. Ravel paused and then looked in Naruto's direction, their eyes locked, and for a moment Naruto saw sadness flow through her expression, before her eyes hardened and she turned her gaze back on Riser. This family is the disgrace. She knows. Naruto thought to himself in shock at the sudden revelation. How dare you? Riser screamed furiously, completely losing himself to his rage, you are no better than that trash. Moments later Ravel was frozen in fear, floating above her with a look of pure rage. Riser was glaring at her as he conjured his most powerful attack above his head. The large fireball was completely white and at least 3 times Riser's height in diameter. The heat it was emitting was so great that she wasn't even sure if her Phenex regeneration would stop it from being fatal. Frozen in terror at seeing the supernova hovering above her, she couldn't do a thing as it started flying towards her. Die! Riser screamed, oblivious to his own apparent insanity or the fact that he was trying to kill his own sister. Seconds later, the large supernova impacted where Ravel was standing, and the whole arena was shaken by the explosion it caused. Ravel! A terrified shout came from where the Phenex family was watching the raiding game. Lord Phenex arrived halfway through the game to see his half-brother make his return. What he did not expect, however, was for his youngest brother to turn on his own sister like he had just witnessed. The whole crowd watching the match was frozen in shock at what they had just seen. Lady Phenex was speechless as she watched the ball of fire collide with her daughter, still not being able to accept the fact that Riser himself was the one who sent the attack. This is all that half-blood Trash's fault, she screamed inside her head furiously, not willing to place the blame on her own precious son. Lord Phenex himself was in a similar state of disbelief. He was snapped out of his thoughts, however, when he heard Ravel slam his fists down on the table they were sitting at, snapping the piece of furniture in half. This is your fault. You forced your arrogant elitist beliefs on Riser and now look what he's done. Ruvel growled furiously, sending all of his killing intent towards his father. Lord Phenex snarled back towards his eldest son, not willing to let him speak to him in such a way. Listen here. The Phenex family's argument was interrupted when gasps were heard all throughout the ballroom. Back in the arena, Riser was grinning like a madman while he waited for the dust to settle. When the dust did settle, however, his grin turned into a frown, and then the frown turned into a hate-filled glare.
In the spot that Ravel had previously been standing was now a large, pitch-black ball of fire.
Inside the fire, Ravel was shaking with her eyes closed firmly, still waiting for the end to come. She had felt like time slowed down as the attack was approaching her, but after several more seconds it still hadn't arrived. Slowly opening her eyes, she found herself inside a large ball of black flames. Looking around, she realized that somebody was holding her in a hug, protecting her from harm. Looking up, she saw spiky blonde hair and azure blue eyes looking back at her. "Oh, Oni-san," she asked nervously. Naruto's eyes widened slightly for a moment before he gave her a warm smile. "It's nice to finally meet you properly, as your big brother," he told her with a heartfelt smile. Ravel didn't know what to say at that point, she just stared at him silently. Seeing the girl's shocked state, Naruto continued to smile at her before motioning to put her back down on the ground. When he did so, Ravel was even more surprised to see that the ball of black flames that had saved her from Riser's attack was actually made out of multiple sets of wings coming from Naruto himself. They were the same as Riser's single pair, except Naruto had multiple pairs and they were all made from the pitch-black fire. Although, unlike when she saw the flames in the orc room, the wings weren't emitting an overwhelming heat towards her. Instead, they were now surrounding her in a comforting warmth. Naruto narrowed his eyes and turned his glare towards Riser. The sheer amount of anger in the glare actually made Riser flinch and take a few steps back from where he had been standing. "You," Naruto said in a cold tone. Without another word, Naruto jumped high into the air, exploding into a massive form of black flames. The floor of the arena was started to crack and tremble from the immense amount of heat and power coming from the form of black flames in the sky. After a few moments, the mass of black flames morphed into the shape of a phoenix. The gigantic phoenix was easily comparable to the size of the arena. The massive creature made of pure black flames started circling high above the ground before setting its sights on Riser. As soon as it did this, the creature roared and started flying straight towards the terrified Phenex. All of Riser's rage was gone, his confidence was gone, even his arrogance in that moment was gone. All that was left was the frozen figure of Riser Phenex, staring up at his superior. As the black phoenix came closer to the ground, its size reduced so that it could fit through the top of the arena. It shrunk to the size of the massive chess pieces scattered throughout the arena and kept flying directly towards Riser. On impact, the shape of the phoenix exploded, sending a wave of black flames pulsing throughout the arena. Surprisingly though, the flames passed of Ravel and the rest of Naruto's peerage without hurting them.
When the flames dispersed, Naruto was revealed to be crouching over Riser's body. In his hand was a long translucent black sword, made out of pure energy.
Grigori Headquarters' Valis' eyes were wide in shock, discarding his usual nonchalant expression. "Is that a Longinus?" "Back in the arena, what are you?" Riser gasped, coughing up blood as he spoke. Naruto thought about the answer before smiling down at the Phenex coughing up blood below him. "The biggest mistake the Phenex clan ever made," he answered darkly. Naruto slowly stood up from his crouching position, removing the sword from Riser's chest. When he did this, instead of the younger Phenex being covered in flames that would normally heal his body, the flaming wings on his back faded, the demonic power within him completely disappeared and he lost consciousness. Riser Phenex Sama has retired. Naruto Uzumaki is the victor. Thanks for watching.